maybe we should have started with this, is you build out a bunch of renewable energy systems, right? Then you keep your coal plants running, you keep your natural gas plants running, and you slowly shut them down as they become unnecessary.
Oh my God. So China is the one that's flooding the market with cheap renewables because it's killing off all the business that you know when Europe and America said we're gonna stop the coal miners in our country and we're gonna give them other jobs to do with wind and solar. China's took those jobs away from those former coal miners who don't have the coal mine or the new job for the renewables. They flood the country, but they are opening 2 coal mines a week.
We're going to agree on that. Like I don't think crop production's ever going to decrease because it has to meet the market demand. Otherwise people would fucking die. Right? Like
Right, but
that's not going to change. What I'm saying is that the cost of those foods will go up because we have to deal with the consequences of climate change. Yeah. What do you want me to address you by?
I have a problem with your video on Jordan Peterson.
Yeah, that's fair. Sorry, but what do you want me to call you?
Oh, PZH is fine.
PZH? Okay. Perfect. Yeah, you can just call me D or Decarbonization or guy with a weightlifting dragon avatar, whatever you like.
Okay.
But yeah, we can jump right into it. Like, we can go point by point. I'll leave it up to you. What's your
yeah, we
first issue?
can start point. So look, bear in mind that the video you made, I don't think Jordan Peterson is like a deeply understands this topic. I think he's done a lot of interviews with other people, and I think he's gleaned some information from some people, and he has like synthesized some of it, but it's not like he's not like his main thing. He's talked to some people, he got upset about from what he heard, and he has like a theory around it, and that's what he's presenting, but it's not like he's an expert on this particular subject.
Yeah, I would fully agree with that. I think my issue with it is he is presenting that to already a million people and presumably millions. And I think it's really important that the information that he presents is accurate. He's done this on Joe Rogan, where Joe Rogan gave a bit of pushback, and he seemed to um, kind of prioritize this more. I'm going to use right wing, but I don't like don't take it the wrong way. This more right wing idea of like pursuing natural gas and carbon capture and that direction of blue hydrogen. I made a really small point of that in my video, but there seems to be a push that way, especially because he works for the Daily Wire, which we know is funded by Wilkes, who's a oil and gas baron. And so,
so there's a whole conspiracy theory around this, yeah.
I wouldn't call it a conspiracy
I don't
theory.
even know what blue hydrogen is.
Blue hydrogen is where you take hydrogen and you crack it, essentially. So you convert it into carbon dioxide and hydrogen from methane, and then you can use that hydrogen. So that's how we use that in what's called the Haber-Bosch process to produce basically all the fertilizer, ammonia, basically on the planet. So natural gas has like a really beneficial use, but you can use it for blue hydrogen because then you can then store that CO2 underground, and that's where it's looking like the hydrogen economy is at least going to start. It's why I made a mention of pink hydrogen in my video as well.
Pink hydrogen is using
sorry.
solar?
Pink hydrogen is then nuclear. So you can create hydrogen in a couple of ways. You can do gray hydrogen, which is you crack it from natural gas and then you just release the CO2. Blue hydrogen, you store it. Turquoise hydrogen, you do something called pyrolysis and you get like hard carbon. It's more expensive than blue hydrogen. Then you get another one called pink hydrogen, which you use high temperature steam electrolysis from nuclear reactors to crack water into oxygen and hydrogen. And then you can do green hydrogen, which is from water using electricity, but it's way more efficient to do high temperature steam electrolysis.
I would hazard a guess that Jordan Peterson knows none of this.
I would agree.
I would
agree.
I would say that he would probably be for fertilizer, like based from natural gas, certainly. I think he's actually advocating for natural gas, perhaps coal where, because he gave the example in the talk with Destiny about people in third world countries chopping down trees. So in that situation, coal would be preferable than people chopping down trees.
Yeah, certainly.
So I don't think he knows about the rainbow colored hydrogen just yet. And I'm not sure even how from it. Certainly I know that you can use ammonia and for fertilizer, and that's very, very important.
Yep.
But I would say, would you not agree that the implementation of renewable sources like wind and solar has increased consumer energy costs?
Would I say, I think it depends what you're looking at. So
Consumer energy prices.
no. So what I would say on that is it partially depends. Old solar and old wind, in line with the references that I showed, are more expensive without subsidies than conventional fuel sources. So if we look at
Okay, so sorry.
Germany,
No, I'm not interested. I'm not interested in old solar. Let's say we got the newest solar,
yeah.
the
So
newest solar PV panels and the newest wind
mhm.
turbines.
Yeah,
Would we not
then it's
still?
cheaper. Yeah. So if we use today's numbers and
But
today's yeah,
right. So don't you think you're missing some elements in that calculation? By
I mean, I
using
was
the LCOE factor, the LCOE calculation.
I'm using LCOE along with long line transmission and battery storage in this calculation.
Then it
So,
can't possibly be cheaper. It cannot possibly be cheaper.
well, um, I don't know what to tell you. Like the calculations have been done on it. The LCOE,
What the
it,
pine? Okay, so
but like, okay, so like,
I
where's your
I'm
like? Are you
I'm not
are
even
you
doing
saying? I know,
I'm
but
not
are
doing
you
calculations. I'm
sure?
saying in reality, have the prices gone up?
In reality, have the prices gone up? Um,
Correct.
Again, I would say that if you look at a place like Germany,
Mhm.
they have about I think it's 60,000 megawatts. I could be off on that number of renewables. Or they have like 66,000, but 60,000 of it were built before renewables were less than fossil fuels. So you would say that overall the cost would be higher, right? What I'm saying is that when you build the new renewable plants, they're cheaper,
Mhm.
right? And the example that I would have is I live in Alberta. We just built a new solar facility, I think in 2021 or 2022, and it had right in the middle of that Lazard study levelized costs of about $1,200 per kilowatt, right in
But
line. So
Germany and Denmark have the highest electricity costs in all of Europe.
yes, and what I was saying on that is it's a mix between wholesale and retail prices. So the retail price is going to be a whole bunch of factors like your value added tax, your other distribution fees, depending on um, like a
Balancing the
myriad of
load,
other things. So, but like that's why I
balancing the
use
load on the
Spain.
grid. If
Yeah.
someplace, if
I know, but
if
that's
there
why
isn't wind,
sure,
yeah, yeah.
but that's why I use Spain as the example because they have an equal amount of renewables to Germany and way lower prices. So all I'm trying to show is like there's a wholesale price for this is how much the electricity costs, and the electricity costs in Germany and France are basically the same, but then the retail price is different, and that's going to be dependent on whatever nation you're in and however they're doing those price dynamics. And you can't blame renewables for increasing that price when it's like an
I think
internal
Spain,
dynamic.
has a much higher degree of nuclear and hydro than they do solar and wind.
Their wind power is like 25%, and their solar is 15%. Off the top of my head, I posted the image in my
But
video.
Germany doesn't have nuclear, or it shut off its nuclear.
I agree that was a
And
stupid decision.
I'm not aware of hydro. Could be
Uh,
some hydro in Germany. I'm
yeah,
not aware.
and I fully agree with that. When I showed the studies in my video, I showed that old nuclear power plants, because they can run for so long, are by far the cheapest energy sources, and it's like not even close. But new nuclear is really, really expensive, and a big part of that is, I mean, we can get into that, but some of the reasons that it is. But a big part of it is because, especially here in North America, we've kind of lost those capabilities of actually building those plants. But
Well,
again,
you regulated it out of you criminalized it in North America, and I would agree also that some of, like, let's say the third-party suppliers that you would use to build the nuclear plant, like they just gave up at some point, and now it's much harder to build one.
Yeah.
But the
Yeah.
core reason was it was regulated out of existence.
Yeah. Like
Certainly
again,
commercial ones.
yeah, I'm right there with you. Like we would be having a totally different discussion right now if we didn't, as I said in the video, dogfuck 40 years of nuclear energy development. It'd probably be
Yeah.
in a better place than solar and wind. There's some issue with like the amount of nuclear material we have kind of running out. But other than that, it's like an amazing energy source. The issue is that's just been cost out by solar and wind, and that's what I was showing in the studies with long line transmission, batteries, solar and wind. It's called a copper plate. There's lots of studies done in Europe on it. You basically transfer the energy around country to country as is needed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like I would call that kind of vaporware. And as far as I know, Germany put some money down on it to get electricity from the Sahara Desert
Yeah.
through wires, but it failed miserably. And
Yeah, underwater is really bad. I'm more talking about if you would be just doing it on the on Europe. So
if
like,
you okay, so let me break down. I'm from Europe,
yep.
so specifically the UK,
Hmm.
our energy costs have gone up dramatically, and
Hmm.
bear in mind. So let's before I jump to the UK, let's just stay on Germany before going
Yep.
to the UK. So Germany's prices have gone up.
Yep.
They've gone up significantly now. You may know exactly better than I do. I'm talking about, the consumer and, let's say,
Hmm.
industries that rely on electricity. But Germany, if you may have heard, has started to de-industrialize. So certain car manufacturing plants have shut down because the energy is so expensive. Certain
Hmm.
steel manufacturing places have shut down. And bear in mind, Germany was kind of like a
Yeah, it's like
manufacturing hub,
yep.
but there were like high quality products
Hmm.
and certainly cars, electronics, steel, and
Hmm.
all that kind of stuff. And the cost of energy, but obviously, energy affects the whole economy because it's a master
Hmm.
resource. But in this particular area, the German workers were more like in these sort of unionized manufacturing jobs. These jobs are going away to other continents, off the
Hmm.
European continent.
Hmm.
So that's a factor specifically with the cost of energy. UK also has that problem, specifically with heating homes. We had a problem during 2022, 2023. I remember specifically me that my energy bill literally jumped times 3 and then jumped times 5.
Hmm.
I don't know about I'm saying me personally, I don't know about the other
Hmm.
metrics literally the bill I received jumped times
Yep.
5 from a period of 4 months.
Hmm.
And at the time, it was a particularly bitter cold winter.
Hmm.
Uh, it was we were having inflation as well from the lockdowns and whatnot, and we were having situations where poor people or people on fixed income, like retired people,
Hmm.
who had to make a decision either to buy food or to turn on heating. And I think that winter it was like -4 or something
Hmm.
Celsius,
Yeah.
and it was rough. We noticed the difference, and looking back at it, it was we England shut off all the coal plants. It not only shut them off, it blew them up in 2021, or I think
Hmm.
2022. It just blew them up because it
Hmm.
never thought it needed it. Same story for the rest of Europe. Not so much for the former Soviet states, but pretty much for most of Western Europe, that was the case. We were stopping using coal,
Hmm.
and just to add, we've got like hundreds of years worth of coal under our feet. We just decided not to use it,
Hmm.
and we used more and more renewables, and as a result, we had to use more and more natural gas as the backup for renewables. Or renewables is simply not standing. We're not producing enough energy to the replacement coal that we shut off, and we all needed renew. We all needed all the countries of Europe together needed the same natural gas at the same time. So when at around October of 2022, no, sorry, October 2021. I'm forgetting now. Prices of natural gas shot up. There was like a shortage of it, and this was basically what happened. So this sort of green energy policy, which is stopping coal because it's high CO2, moving to renewables, then using natural gas as like the backups to renewables. That kind of mixture, that kind of energy mix is extremely expensive for the people in Europe. It's expensive for us to pay it, and Europe is already not doing in terms of economics. Europe is basically stagnant since 2008, so this isn't helping in the least. So I'm just trying to explain that that does kind of hurt the poor, and that was Jordan Peterson was talking about. I mentioned that poor people had to make a decision between buying food and heating their homes, elderly people as well. We did have a lot of people that didn't turn on their heating during the winter, and apparently the Economist did a study that more people died during the winter of, I don't know if it's, I think it was 2022, than COVID had killed those people, because people just didn't turn on the heating, and cold is a very deadly thing, especially for the elderly. So it is hurting people in the present, and
Okay.
that is something that we need to consider when making these decisions about do we want to, how catastrophic is the future going to be if we reduce CO2 when people are getting hurt right now, dying right now, affecting the cost of the standard of living right now by affecting these energy with these energy policies and increasing the price of energy.
Yeah. Okay. That's a lot to respond to. Jump in if
I actually wrote
I
about it. If you want, you can read it in
okay.
a Substack I did.
Sure. But just so I can respond here. So my first note would be, again, when we're talking about Germany, I think they made a terrible mistake by shutting down their nuclear. And I think if we compare Germany to Spain, then and had Germany kept their nuclear power plants on, a lot of these issues probably wouldn't have occurred. And I think there's a big missing piece in everything that we're saying, which is obviously the Ukraine war, right?
The
You would
prices went up
agree,
4 months before.
but you would agree that the primary cause of the I can't speak to the 4 months before, but like the biggest spike that we saw in total energy prices, natural gas prices, was definitely due to the Ukraine war,
So
right?
hold on a second.
I mean, that's
I
what
mean,
I.
it could be related down the line, but the prices
Well,
spiked because
I showed
we
that in
had
my video,
low.
right? It was like when Peterson talks about 5 times what it used to be. That
Mhm.
was because of the Ukraine war. It wasn't because there was a shortage in gas. It wasn't because of anything,
Well,
but
there was
well,
a
but it was a shortage of gas because of the Ukraine war, not because of some like other external factor causing a shortage of gas, right? And I think we bury the
right, but
lead a
this
little bit
this
if
energy,
we're
but this it's a good point because it necessarily means that the energy mix is not robust. Be-
so.
we literally exclude certain bits of energy. So if for example we kept coal, right, and we
Mhm.
and we didn't shut down all the coal factories, and let's say natural gas, it's suddenly a huge spike. People, all these countries need it at the same time, and we can't give it to everyone at the same time, so the prices goes up, and who can afford to pay for it? But if we kept more energy in the energy mix, we would be able to have a more robust response to these kinds of spikes.
Sure, but I'm like nobody knew that this was going to happen, right? Except obviously a little bit before it. So like countries and nations are going to kind of go par for the course and build out their systems like that, and they clearly weren't expecting a war to cause such dramatic effects on it. The
Can I just
thing
can I just
no
add like a point?
okay
Sorry, go
sure
ahead. I'll do it
I
later.
was just like again like this gets into a really kind of frustrating topic when we talk about renewables. It's like you have to like build out the renewables and then create these systems and go through. And then people are like, well, name a country or a place that's built on 100% renewables. And you're like, well, we don't have that yet necessarily for full solar and wind. We do on hydro, obviously. Um, but it takes like physical time and money to build out these systems. So when I'm talking about what we should do now, we know that the levelized costs of solar and wind is cheaper than any other energy source. We, including batteries and including transmission, right?
That's
And
not that
so
can't that I don't think that's true.
I, I
The
don't know. I don't know what you should
levelized
tell me. Like,
let me just make a quick point.
okay,
I'm sure you can say that the levelized cost of PV PV solar panels and wind turbines are cheap on their own, but if you include it in the overall grid, there is no way it just costs much more. And
like I don't know.
all the
I don't know
places
what
bear that out.
I don't know what you like. You would have to provide me an actual
Sure,
reference for
let me
that, because
provide you.
like what we're looking at, and please don't provide me the Bank of America one.
I don't know what that is.
Okay.
I don't have it, so you're okay.
Let me see. So okay. Why green hurt the poor? Levelized.
The
Okay.
green
Oh,
one
okay. Oh,
is the
fuck me.
UK.
Is this Mills paper?
No,
Yeah. This looks a
that's
lot
just
like.
wholesale energy prices.
Yeah. So this is one of the issues that I have. I've seen this
Uh-huh.
chart before. This one at the electricity prices more than wind versus deployed. I've seen this chart before. I actually recently redid this chart because it's a little bit old.
Okay.
And the trend doesn't look that way anymore. And again, you're looking at retail price versus wholesale. If you look at wholesale price, the trend's in the opposite direction.
I am interested in the price the consumer pays.
I'm also interested in that. But the issue is different countries are going to be doing different things to affect that price, right? And putting different taxes and different tariffs, and they have different like Europe. One thing that they did is they hyper liberalized their grid system. So it's basically a big free market, where in other
No, it
grids, and
isn't.
especially from my
No, it is not.
understanding, they have like
There's
one of the
nothing
most liberalized energy grids in the
that is
world.
far.
Okay.
Look, Europe. I don't know if I can explain it. Europe is a regulatory powerhouse. Everything
I
is government.
understand that, but
Yeah.
they substantial like the, I I have to
There's
provide you with the
nothing.
reference, but like
There is no free market in. There's no free market in any energy in Europe. Not
okay,
in
but you
the UK
you
has a kind of the government does like 70% of the work itself, and it like buys energy, and then like it maybe the customer facing side is a private company, but they control nothing.
that's
In fact, when there was a spike in October in 2021,
mhm.
seven companies just went out of business because they have to like keep the same price for 6 months as by law, and they're just, well,
So okay, so
we can't
in
do
all
this. So
fairness, I'm like when we're talking about Europe, we have to separate Britain and the rest of Europe, correct?
Europe
Because
is even worse. Europe is like way more like social welfare. The
okay,
government
I
owns
like
stuff in the UK.
again that is broadly true. What I'm talking about is their energy market specifically. I don't have the like I have to search through my
Okay,
what I have to show you. But
it doesn't sound like that's the case. So I'll have to see something. But
okay,
as far
sure.
as I know, Europe to me Europe is
That's why the
people in
Spanish
suits
case.
telling people what to do.
I know, but that's why the Spanish case was so interesting, because Spain said like no to the natural gas like hikes and things like that, and obviously they were able to deal with it better because they had so much renewables, they had so much
Didn't Spain tell
nuclear.
people to? Didn't Spain tell people to buy solar panels and it will pay them back for the energy?
Possibly, but
But also
again,
Spain could benefit from like the being closer to the equator and having
well, I mean,
uh
so but
solar.
you're kind of you're making the argument here. So this is the argument for renewables and how they work on transmission, right? Is that um, it's easier the example's easier with wind because wind works through the night. But if you have wind all over what's called a 3,000 kilometer copper plate, basically you can interconnect the power
Okay,
systems and transport them. But
before we play reliability chicken, um, can we just with regards to the price? I've showed you some charts. What do you think?
of sorry, what
Price.
of price? Yes,
Price
I
is going up the
like
more renewables we have.
okay, that's not like The issue is that's not true in like every
It
case.
is
Again,
true in
no, but
reality. What do you mean?
okay, the issue that do you not understand what I'm saying? That like the retail prices that people are seeing is not directly related to the price of the power system. It's directly related to all of the other systems that are associated with it,
I'm sure
right?
it is. I'm sure you're right. But all I'm saying is the more you increase renewables in these systems and the more
No,
you
that's
remove coal, the higher
correlation,
the
not
prices.
causation, right? You have
It, but I can give you the
you don't have a
causation.
cause.
Yeah, I can give you
Okay,
the cause.
okay,
You need failover. You need higher reliability. You need if the sun stops shining or if the wind or if you have low wind throughout an entire year. So for example, in 2021 we had 11 days in the UK where it was very very cold and we needed energy, but the wind was at 10% capacity.
okay. So
So these kinds of
okay,
additional systems you have to pay twice, meaning
okay.
it's not obvious what you need, but it does mean that the grid needs to pay twice
How
to have more
how big
backup
is Britain?
powers.
How big is Britain?
Um, I don't know off the top of my head. It's nice. It's a nice big island with like
Sure,
67,
sure, but
68 million people.
it's probably what 1/3 the size of Germany
Maybe,
in and around, right? And
maybe.
then Germany is in and around about 1/3, or sorry, about 50% the size of Texas. And one of
I honestly can't,
I,
don't even know.
I'm using this as an example for what I mean by the copper plate. When you
Okay,
have really small systems, and I said this right in my video, nuclear is great for islands, right? Islands and places where you may not be able to transmit the energy, or your country decided to break off from the European Union. And in those cases, when your copper plate isn't sufficiently large that you can transfer that energy that's required, then you need other systems to dampen it. So you're going to, if you look at Germany by itself and try to only do renewables without hydro and nuclear, you're going to have extraordinarily high prices. I am right there with you. I'm fighting my ass off to say like transmission is the
okay.
key to making renewables
Let's
cheap. So
do
like,
this.
but that's what you're not engaging with is like, do you see my issue is we can say that like renewables by
I,
themselves in a place that isn't big enough will make energy really expensive. And I agree with you. I haven't, yeah.
I'm not entirely sold on the idea of like having renewables across a large country and then having
Okay.
cables to
Okay.
have like
But
reliability.
it's
But
not
that's
it's
the
not
ones.
cables. It's literally transmission lines. Like
Yeah,
okay,
yeah.
Canada does this. Like British Columbia sends 25% of its power to California. That's like
Okay,
2,000 kilometers.
okay.
Right? Like
This. Let me just
it's
ask.
not some new idea.
Let me just ask. Why is this relevant to my question about price right now?
It's relevant to your question of price right now
So
because
prices are increasing. I'm paying more
okay,
money. I mean, it's obviously it's gone down a little. It's gone down somewhat since
since the end of the
since they.
war, or so not the end of the
It's
war, but
there's still a war. There
sorry,
is
but
still a war,
since the end of the crisis related to the war.
but it's still
Because
twice. It's still twice as expensive since before. And bear in mind, like we had like our government is subsidizing this. There was a cap to how much you could be charged, and now that cap's higher. But the government was subsidizing the energy costs because it was just so high. So I'm just asking, here in the UK specifically, again, we're an island. We have a lot of wind turbines, a lot,
yeah,
and we stopped using coal, but we are paying a lot of money for electricity.
I I I understand that, right? Like I'm not saying that's not true. And I'm saying that like if you're England, at what do you know, did they blow up their coal plants before or after Brexit? Do you know?
The last one, no, it's been
But
like a long
like
time. The
what
last one that
okay.
blew up, I think, was in 2021, in the
Okay. So
middle of
my
2021.
the reason that I'm asking this question is because currently Ireland is sending a power line from France to Ireland so that they can connect the renewable grids to each other, right? The thing
France
is,
is nuclear.
I, I know that, but France is part of the broader European grid that will all be associated with this transition. I don't have any issue with nuclear, especially existing nuclear plants. It's clearly going to be part of the transition.
Okay, so can you agree though with Jordan Peterson's point that technically the left, like your left in quotation
Yeah.
meme,
Yeah.
do hate nuclear. They are outright against nuclear. You have the Club of Rome, and I'm not talking about, hippies in the street. I'm talking about, these institutions for promoting.
Uh,
You have Club of Rome, the Sierra Club, all against nuclear, and you have
sure.
diehard
Sure.
anti-nuclear people saying
I'm
no.
I'm not going to deny that. The left, like I said, fucked over 40 years of nuclear development. Like you're never going to get an argument out of me on that. Like Canada is just starting to re-up their nuclear power plants.
Okay, so you're
But
excluding
like,
yourself from the left, but
well,
if
no, I'm
you
not excluding
just
myself.
take a look at them, if
But
you take a
like
look
I
at
don't
them from a
care. I just care
distance,
about what's true, right? And
sure,
so
that's great.
like
No,
like
I'm fine. If you look at the left in quotations from a distance,
sure.
and they are for renewables, they are against nuclear, they're against coal, obviously. I think, are they against gas? I'm not. Probably a little. No, or
Yeah,
not
yeah.
at all.
I would say, like if we're gonna make really broad statements, we'll just say yeah, the left is renewables and solar, and the right is coal, natural gas, and nuclear. Right? If we just
Can
want
we
to
also
draw
agree?
these distinctions, sure. Like
Can we also agree that if you have that type of energy mix, you necessarily need to reduce your consumption? I'm pretty sure that the
no,
intention was, yeah,
I
we have all these things and we use electricity less.
no, I do not accept that point in the slightest.
Not you, the left.
Sure, I think you can get a bunch of insane comments on the left, and I'm not going to sit here and defend the positions of other people. I'm just going to defend the positions of my own. You can call them on the left, you can call them whatever you want,
Well,
but like,
let's just
I don't
let's
know,
just
like
defend
I
it.
don't know.
Let's together attack the position of whoever Jordan
Sure,
Peterson
yeah,
is
yeah,
talking about.
I know, but
So
like, but what my issue is like Jordan Peterson making one correct comment that like which I also made, which is, yeah, sure, the left doesn't like nuclear, and that's silly. But you can make the comment now of what would we do? Should we build more nuclear power plants, or should we build more renewables? And the answer is always going to be build more renewables. And I think that's where our disconnect is, because you're saying, well, look at all these increases. Like again, if so, one piece of that is going to be you live in England where you have a small copper plate, so renewables are not going to be like nearly as effective as you need them to be because you can't transmit that energy properly.
yeah, can I just ask a question? You're saying this because you're saying this for availability, right?
Yeah. So okay, so maybe this will be a better example. In a different one of my videos, I literally go through the Python code that I did. And what I did is I took all of the United States, because they have hourly data of every renewable system that they have for 3 years. And I looked at what those trends look like versus the demand trends. And then I ran an optimizing solver such that if I had 3 hours of battery storage, how much money would it cost to build that? And
Okay, what
um,
about
uh,
11 days?
no, the answer is 3 hours.
What if I need 11 days of
If you need
reliability?
11 days, that's terrible, right? And
So
this
again,
is but
we actually
this is
had.
aligned with the literature. This is literally aligned with all of the literature we have on this topic, that you get regional energy droughts with renewables,
Yeah,
but when
why
you
3 hours?
expand, so do you understand? How about this? Can you tell? Do you know what I mean when I say copper plate?
So as far as I understood from the debates that I've seen from people on your side, they're basically saying that the sun moves around the earth at a particular rate, or the wind is in one place but not in another. So you want a grid
Mm-hmm.
that passes energy when you have renewables in one place but not in another. So it's a sort of reliability or availability equation that you're talking about.
Perfect.
I'm just
Exactly.
talking about cheapness right now, but I don't understand why it's just 3 hours. Is it just 3 hours because the sun moves from one
No.
part to the
So
other, so you only need 3 hours worth of downtime?
when I'm saying 3 hours, I mean if you uh, produce, if your whole country, we're going to, for the sake of this, we're going to say all of America. So I'm bundling all of America's power into one box, okay?
Hmm.
Um, and and so I'm saying we have all of this power to distribute across the grid of all of America, right? And so when you do that, you never have a drought, energy drought, because you always have wind blowing at night somewhere in America, and you
This
always
is the theoretical. This is a theoretical concept.
this is this. I mean, it's not a theoretical concept because it's what we're currently building out and doing. But yes, it's obviously
My
theoretical
my
because it doesn't
understanding.
exist currently. But yes,
My understanding is that you have renewables,
yep.
and then you have backup powers like natural gas. That
No,
if the renewables
that's that's
don't work,
only
you
right
turn on the
now.
natural gas.
That's only right now because we don't have enough renewable penetration to like we don't have enough renewables to produce all of the energy that we currently need, right? So
And
once
transmission lines.
and transmission lines, that's correct. That's why Biden's infrastructure bill is designed entirely to, or not designed entirely, but has parts of it that are meant to upgrade their transmission system because that's one of the
Okay.
necessities of renewable energy. And that's what Europe
Right.
is doing
So
as well. That every country, as far as I know, is mandated or are mandating to go up to 15% um, at least transmission between countries. And some countries already have that.
okay,
But
so my understanding is you need to substantially increase the transmission line in America to do this.
mhm.
And someone did a back of an envelope calculation, and he's not a person on your side in particular, but he did calculate it will take 282 years to build out the grid for the level that you're asking it to.
I mean, you would have to send me that.
Yeah,
My
I can do
so
that.
like the issue with that is I can't speak to what he's doing, but the main thing you would do is you have like grid operating areas essentially, and so the transmission lines that we're talking about would essentially be taking a single battery and transferring that energy to another battery system, and then that gets distributed amongst the grids that already exist in those places. Right? Does that make
Okay, but
sense?
this is yeah, but
Yeah.
I'm
I
just
mean, these are just like what is this? Just like a PowerPoint? Like I like yeah. I like I'll look into it.
Mhm.
Um, and again, like
because you realize
sure,
that
from 2008
bi-
to 2021, they only made so many transmission lines, but that's
Mhm.
like
because
so, but
people
no,
don't like
do you see
them.
what you're doing? Like it's like we haven't like the reason Biden's infrastructure bill was like so big is because they
Mhm.
hadn't upgraded a lot of their grids in like literally 100 years, right? So
Right, this is adding more.
yeah, this is adding more, but all of that takes is like the actual will to do it. If you didn't need to
No,
build
no, no,
those
no,
grid
no,
systems, why
no,
would
no,
we
no.
build
It's
more,
no, no,
right?
no,
Like
no. The problem with building out transmission lines and pylons
mhm.
is the same problem you have with building houses and apartment blocks and whatnot. It's very difficult to build. It's very difficult to get people to in the area to agree. Can we build some power lines in your area? They said, no, I don't like power lines. I'm going to vote against it. You need like to do these environmental reports before you're allowed to even put one brick on the ground. I'm talking about houses. You go through like a very serious bureaucracy before even one shovel goes into the ground.
Sure,
That's
but
why it takes
you
so
can make
long.
that argument for literally anything, right? Like
Like housing?
yeah, you can make it for housing, you can make it for other power systems, you can make that for why nuclear hasn't like over like at the end of the
No, you
day.
can't make it for
No,
nuclear, but you can make it for new
wait,
transmission lines.
what you can absolutely make it for nuclear. Do you know how much regulation it takes? What are you talking about?
Right.
It's
So
such a pain in
but
the
you
ass to
the
get nuclear built
the reason
because
why
people's
okay,
yeah,
sure,
it's the
sure,
same reason
sure,
you just said.
but the thing with nuclear is it's a very high density source energy. So let's say yeah,
Okay, oh my god.
it
Yeah.
went through all the process, and yeah, it's just but once you build it, it's a very small area that produces a lot of energy. With wind and solar, you need a ton of land,
No,
really a
you
ton of
don't.
land.
I did the
It's a
calculation
very
in
low
my thing.
energy dense. It's a
Oh my
very
god,
low
this
energy
is such
dense
a yeah, but
power.
okay, but look at energy density per dollar spent because that's what matters. We can talk about energy density all day, but at the end of the
Right,
day,
but you
for every
still
dollar you spend, you get more energy out. That's
Right.
what's
So, but with
important.
regards to the point of building things out, you need a lot of land. You need a lot of pylons, a lot of transmission lines, a lot of land for the panels themselves, for the wind turbines themselves. You just whereas a nuclear power plant is a very very efficient and high density one spot. Yes, maybe there's a lot of regulations for that particular nuclear plant, but once it's built, it's like you don't need a lot of that other stuff to be built
Yeah, but you can
as
make the
much as you
same
do
line.
renewables.
You can make that same argument with the like. Well, once you build those transmission lines, once you build the renewables, once you
Oh,
like
but you
but we can
okay,
reduce this
you need,
argument
let me
as much
just
as we
throw a number.
want.
Let me just throw a number. You need times 100 more land to build on or to get approval to build on than you do nuclear.
Yeah, and we're able to do it. Look, we beat renewable targets every single year. There's a good chart of the IEA saying predicting how much renewables are going to be built every year, and it's wrong every single time. Right? Like we are building shit tons of this. So I don't know where this issue that you're talking about is coming from because we're clearly able to do it. We're clearly able to build it out,
Well,
right?
in
Like
America and Canada, you not? Is it not the case that you're uh, pumping more fossil fuels than ever before? Like
uh
America right now is the leading is the number one exporter of fuel and natural gas. If I'm if
yeah,
unless I'm
probably.
mistaken.
Yeah, no, that's I like yeah, probably.
And again, like you need
this is
energy
what we're
to.
talking. Like I'm not some like fucking just stop oil guy, right? Like I understand there's a transition that's required. I understand like
Okay.
my argument, and maybe we should have started with this is you build out a bunch of renewable energy systems, right? Then you keep your coal plants running, you keep your natural gas plants running, and you slowly shut them down as they become unnecessary, right? Because you have the sufficient power capacity built up. That's not going to work
Right. So I
in a
think what
place
happened.
like Britain, but it would work in all of Europe. It'll work in Canada. It'll work in the United States. It'll work anywhere, like I said, with a big copper plate where you continue to use those things as backups. I don't care, right? Like I want them to be reduced, right? So you slowly shut them down as they're displaced by the renewable energy systems. That's why it's a transition and not
I
something that
think
we
the
just like axe and cut like Germany did with their nuclear power plants. I think that was terrible.
I think the problem is that bureaucrats committed
Oh,
to certain
oh,
agreements.
hey, buddy, just having a debate in here.
Oh, I don't mind listening.
Okay.
I think Europe committed to certain climate agreements,
Mm-hmm.
and take for example the natural gas coming from Russia,
Yeah.
and a variety of different things it being imported from China, let's say. So Europe committed to certain agreements. It closed off its coal plants, so it closed off certain manufacturing plants that were particularly polluting,
Mm-hmm.
and those plants still exist, just in other countries that didn't commit to these climate agreements. So Russia's natural gas, like that's not on the balance sheet of Europe's, emissions, and a variety of different things from China that's not on the balance sheet of Europe. So I think Europe was like more under pressure from either its voters or the World Economic Forum or a variety of different reasons that politicians signed on for. And they
Sure,
did
but
it. They first shut off the coal and then hoped that everything would be okay.
sure. Like I'm not going to sit here and defend bad public policy done by like incompetent politicians. Like there's obviously issues and problems that they're going to do. What like I'm just saying build more renewable power, right? Like that's always right now that's the answer because of how cheap and effective and efficient it is. And
Well, I
don't
would
shut
argue
down the things
nuclear.
that aren't unnecessary. The issue with nuclear is it's really expensive to implement, right? So if I'm an investor, like put yourself in my boots or like an investor's boots. If I'm an investor and I have $1 billion to spend, say, and I can say, "Oh, look at all these solar and wind plants coming up,"
Well,
right? No,
I'm sure
just
I'll
hey,
save you time. No, I understand what you're gonna
yeah,
say.
okay.
And
So
I appreciate, and I've even had the breakdown of how many years they have to wait till they get a return on their investment. But
yeah.
I think the point is, and I don't know if it's even possible in terms of investing because it's literally governments paying for everything in Europe anyway.
Mhm.
I think the UK should not have shut down its nuclear plant, the Hinkle point or Hinkle something C.
I
I
mean,
forgot.
we're in full agree. Like, I guess where are points of contention at this point? Like, you seem to just not believe that like building transmission lines is possible, which fine.
Well, it's I suppose you can
But
say
like
it's the
is
same as nuclear.
well, no, but because we're doing it right. Like that's the issue that I have is like this is literally getting tons of funding. This is getting tons of support. This is happening currently. It's
Sorry,
not happening
as
with nuclear.
getting tons of funding and it happening are two different things.
Yeah, but like there's like you can look at the list of I'm more familiar with North America of high voltage power lines that are being put between Canada and the United States specifically so that we can transmit a whole bunch of power into the American grid. Right?
Can
Like
I
this
ask a
is
question? How much
yeah.
in Canada, what is the consumer prices going up or down for electricity?
Well, most of our it's not a fair comparison and
I'm
because
just asking.
most of our power is from hydro. So it's like 8 cents a kilowatt hour.
So it's low.
It's super low. And because we
Okay.
have tons and tons of hydro, and this is what I'm talking. So when I look at a Canada perspective, you just send power, but basically Alberta, Saskatchewan are the two places that rely the most on fossil fuels. You just put power lines between your western grids and your eastern grids, and you can get a bunch of wind and solar out of Alberta, mostly in Saskatchewan, and then you have a fully integrated grid that can be 24/7 renewable, right? And so this is what I'm talking about with the copper. So again, I get you being in Britain is going to be a totally different scenario because it's a small island that isn't interconnected with other places, and you're going to get really high renewable power costs, especially if you have a liberal market where the natural gas operators will know that they can spike their prices while renewable systems are low.
Okay. Can you agree though that if assuming politicians have made bad decisions or went gun ho on one side and not careful enough on another side, which they should have
Mhm.
considered,
Sure.
would you say that if you put it all together and wrap a bow around it, it does seem to people like Jordan Peterson that the government is forcing people to adopt this agenda and is hurting them at the same time?
Um, I think I would put a big caveat on that as in that it depends on what government, right? So if I looked at what
Uh,
Spain, no, but
Take Germany and
again,
England.
so yeah, in the case of Germany, I'm right there with you. I don't know enough about England, but shutting down the nuclear plants was stupid, and I will agree with you to the end of the earth that was a very stupid decision, right?
No,
But then I
no,
look at a place
I
like
think
Spain and I'm like, hey, look how good they're doing. Look at all of the provisions that they're making. Look how they were able to keep cheap power, keep their nuclear plants on, add renewables, and as they add more and more renewables, they can turn off those gas plants. Right? Like
with regards to Germany, in addition to shutting off the nuclear because the Greens wanted it, they're also giving farmers issues because they can't emit too much nitrogen. So
uh
recently, very recently,
you mean
farmers
I would guess you mean methane from
methane,
animals?
sure.
That's
I'm
that
not
would be
sure
my
if you.
guess. Sure.
So I'm not sure if you've seen in the news, but like 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, farmers went into the capital. They had manure
Mm-hmm.
with them.
Yeah,
They shot
yeah,
manure
yeah,
at the politicians' buildings.
yeah,
So this is
yeah.
the regulations are so restrictive. They basically have to stop the farms altogether, and then not only will there be a shortage of electricity and high energy prices as a result of it, but you also have a shortage of food and higher cost of food as a result of farms closing down. And then you'll have people with regards to deindustrializations and manufacturing companies moving out of the continent, uh, less jobs. So if you wrap a bow around it, the whole thing seems like you're going back like 100 years in the past and making
So
people hungry, cold, and poor.
so I don't know the specifics of this. I know that obviously cattle produce methane. There's some really interesting solutions to it. If you're interested, you can look up red seaweed. Seems to kind of metabolize that methane in their
Yeah,
stomachs and convert it.
it's kind of like I'm familiar, but it's not like it's kind of like a cute idea that we don't know if it works yet
Yeah,
on scale.
there's another chemical compound too that can be added to it. As far as I know, again, I like these are just interesting engineering solutions to solve the problem. And again, I'm not saying that like every policy that politicians are going to make is going to be reasonable or good. Like I can speak a lot better to the Canadian system where our entire farming industry is almost completely exempt. It's upwards of 90% of all emissions that happen on farming is exempt, and depending on what type of farm you have, it'll be more or less. And that includes cow burps and land use and all of these things. So, like, I'm not going to sit here and say that hey, this policy from like some country is good or not. That especially that I'm not familiar with, but I can speak to how well the Canadian carbon tax had been implemented and suggest that as a policy for other places, and that gets into the crux of I guess probably maybe the argument that we have. And my issue with Jordan is that he essentially doesn't want to admit that the externality of climate change exists as a problem and that we should price in that externality into our systems.
Okay, let's do this. So I will go a step beyond Jordan Peterson and say I agree that the world is heating.
Okay.
And but I would say that I don't think it's a catastrophe. I don't agree with climate catastrophe as it is.
What do you
So
mean? What do you mean by catastrophe?
I'm agreeing with climate change or climate that the earth
Warm.
is warming up, but I don't agree that it is catastrophic.
Okay. Do you agree that it's 100% human caused, or for
No,
all practical?
but
What percent?
I don't
If
think
you were
it's
to put
100% human caused, but it is increasing in temperature.
so, but
either
if you
way.
were to put a percent to it, what percent would
Okay,
you
I'll
say
tell
is
you what.
human
For the
caused?
sake of argument, let me just say it's 100% because I don't know
Okay.
how to react to it right now, or most of it, or 100%.
Okay.
It's
Sure.
not my actual position, but just for the sake of argument, let's say it is.
Okay. Okay. So, and then obviously it would follow that it's methane and carbon dioxide causing it. So, do you agree that damage is caused to, like economic damage, and is caused due to climate change?
Not necessarily.
Okay. So this is where I start to get into my issue with Jordan Peterson's argument.
Let's say I think I've seen risk analysts
Mm-hmm.
do this for investment, and like at best you're looking at something like if we take 0.02% of our GDP and invest it in either preventative or post related issues, like something got broken because of climate and it needs to be fixed, then that's enough. So it's in any which case it's a very, very minor issue, not a catastrophe.
I'm not familiar with who you're talking
Yeah, I can
about.
show that, but it's a
Sure. Like, and you saw like what I presented, and you can estimate, you can take the
yes, but
damage caused
I
by
did see what
GDP and convert that into dollar per ton, right?
for the whole planet or for the Africa.
Well, I used Africa in my example of the economic loss due to climate change already, but
Okay.
you can do that for any continent that you want.
Okay, let's take Africa.
Sure.
Let's-
So
and
I
let's
believe it was
take it-
13.6, right?
And
So
let's
if
take
it-
your scenario.
Sure.
And let's say we don't do anything with regards to climate. We keep doing exactly the same thing as we're doing right now, no changes.
Mhm.
But in this scenario, we flood Africa with very, very cheap energy.
Sure.
Would we still lose GDP, or would we even gain or double or triple the GDP?
Well, that depends what you mean by cheap energy, because renewables are the cheapest energy
Coal,
source in the world now.
Natural gas, coal, natural gas, fossil fuels, some renewables, but mainly like they're going from cutting down trees or using animal dung to heat their homes and cook their food, to coal, to petrol to drive their cars, to run machines, to electricity where they can to run machines. So now they have
Yeah,
all
like
these
obviously,
machines in the economy.
clearly, like industrialization of nations is going to bring more economic prosperity. And if that's
Okay.
done, if that's done with fossil fuels, then obviously that would happen. The argument then is how much extra damage is caused by those fossil fuels versus had they implemented renewables. So, um, and how much more economic potential would they have? How much more economic, like, I guess, value do we have to put into new technology, into dealing with crops dying, more droughts, dealing
By the
with.
way, with regards to crops, that's only going up. So
So,
so the problem.
yes, that's true, but it's not going up as fast as it would be had we not had climate change. That's like this is where we get into the important metrics of what those lines look like. There's when we're looking at the lines of climate change versus no climate change, we get more crops with no climate change. So we have to make up whatever that difference is with technology, which inevitably increases costs. Things like
Well, I don't
what?
exactly agree. So I would say this. We get more crops the more synthetic fertilizer we use.
Yep.
And in general, like across, actually, I can do the world in data stuff.
Mm-hmm.
In general, it's only cereal production, cereal yield per population is only going up.
I
So
agree. I'm just like, do you not understand the argument that I'm making is that it's not
no,
going up as
I'm
fast as
just
it would be. So like we're going to agree on that. Like I don't think crop production's ever going to decrease because it has to meet the market demand. Otherwise people would fucking die. Right? Like
right, but
that's not going to change. What I'm saying is that the cost of those foods will go up because we have to deal with the consequences of climate change.
okay.
Right?
Would you then agree that because of our use of technology, our use of drip irrigation, our use of synthetic fertilizer, we necessarily need less land to produce more food?
Sure, that's what the literature is showing, right? The
Great.
literature
So
shows that places that have better technology aren't as affected by climate change, but they still are affected by climate change. And even here in Alberta, in Canada and Alberta, we're showing we've had crop losses and only been able to make it up by increasing the land area that we're using to make those crops. So we have a net gain, but we also need more net area because we're getting less crop per bushel. Right?
I'm not familiar with that. I'm not familiar with that particular stat, but
Well, it's you can look at the Stats Canada results. I can link it. Actually, I have it right here. Where are we? Shit, that's not the one.
as far as I can see, I don't see necessarily an issue with crop yields, and it's only the trajectory is only in the going up. It's not going up like a hockey stick up, but is always going up. And
So
the more people have access to technology and energy and synthetic fertilizer, then the more yield you'll have.
I agree. I'm not disagreeing with that. I'm the
Even
important
in
part.
even in
No,
Africa.
but the important part is to model what your crops would be had climate change not existed, and that's the problem that we're running into. Right? You can read through this. Wheat harvests have decreased. Total wheat production fell
What do
by
you mean by
6.
climate change not existed?
So, like in that, if we had the same climate that we had in the 1900s, like, right? So we can measure the difference between what the
Okay, I'll
expected
tell you
crops
what.
are.
You tell me. If we were prior to 1880s,
Sure.
what would be our crop yield without technology versus without it?
My understanding is it's about 10 to 15% more,
Oh,
including including our technology. So we have 10 to 15% less crop yield today than if climate change didn't exist, right? And you have to
hypothetically.
yeah, but you have to make
Okay.
up. But so in terms of like food production, that means all of this extra technology that was required in order to meet that, right? You have like fertilizer costs money, right? Drip irrigation costs money. All of these things cost money, right? And so I'm right there with you. Our crops are never like our total production isn't going to go down. It's just not going to go up at the rate or at as fast of a rate, right? Which means, and high cost food is really bad for poor nations, right? And we saw that with the Ukrainian war, with the grain that couldn't
We
get
saw that with Sri
sent.
Lanka too.
Yeah, like, and so more heat, more
No,
systems
no, no,
like that.
no. Sri Lanka, uh, Sri Lanka collapsed in I think 2021, 2022, early 2022. Sorry, the whole economy and the political country collapsed
Yeah.
because the higher price the year before the price of natural gas was increased.
Mm-hmm.
So the government of Sri Lanka tried to apply for some sort of World Bank loan, and they said, okay,
Mm-hmm.
so fertilizer is expensive anyway. We're going to apply for a loan. We're going to tell all our farmers to use organic, like
Mm-hmm.
not synthetic fertilizer.
Oh yeah,
We'll still have the
that's
yields,
terrible.
and we'll get some money from the World Bank. They had half the yields that they did before, and again, this goes towards natural gas goes up in price. This
Yes.
affects fertilizer.
Yeah, and so we should move to energy systems that aren't affected by the extraction of certain fuels and are right. Right, like when we talk about actual cheap energy, right? Like, why do you think solar and wind is so cheap? Because once you put that capital cost investment in,
What you should have what
you
you
don't
should
have to
have
do
told me is
anything.
if we stopped. What you should have said that if we didn't stop using coal, the spike of natural gas wouldn't be as bad, and then people in Sri Lanka could have had synthetic fertilizer because
Sure,
because other countries had another source of energy to rely on that's maybe more polluting but is cheap and
sure,
accessible.
sure. I'm not disagreeing with that, but the place that we get into is how much damage has climate change already caused, which is a lot to especially poor nations, and it's only going to get worse. I showed where those crops start to really yield due to heat stress. And yeah, we might be able to solve those problems. We might be able to use genetic modification and have Monsanto farms all over Africa and Asia, but that's all going to cost more money. And this is what we're talking when we're comparing the economic outcomes of different systems. And the only argument that Destiny or me are trying to make is that carbon taxes are important and we should price in that economic damage into our analysis. And then you can use those funds to
Who's
help
paying
those.
who's paying those who's paying the carbon tax? Countries, Western countries that already halved or
I would argue
quartered
that,
their output.
yeah, 100%.
Yeah, but not countries like India or China that are actually polluting the most. They
Except
wouldn't
India and
dare.
China are
They
now
would.
leading in renewable energy
They're making.
developments.
Yeah. The. Yeah.
They've
Okay.
installed China installed the most renewables out of any country last year.
Oh my God. So China is the one that's flooding the market with cheap renewables because it's killing off all the business that you know when Europe and America said we're gonna stop the coal miners in our country and we're gonna give them other jobs to do with wind and solar. China's took those jobs away from those former coal miners who don't have the coal mine or the new job for the renewables. They flood the country, but they are opening 2 coal mines a week, and
Yeah,
so is India, especially
yeah,
after the time when
yeah,
one
and
second,
China,
one second,
China,
especially after the time that natural gas increased in price, they they planned on opening more coal plants. By any metric you look at, China's polluting by far the most, and there is no way in hell they're going to tax the most productive energy. So, sorry, the no way in hell they're going to tax anything that will shrink their economy, especially energy, because energy is directly
okay,
related to making more GDP.
okay.
It's like
Why do you think that they're building so much renewable energy?
they want to grow their economy.
And
Oh, renewable energy or energy in general.
why do you think they're building so
Sorry,
much more so much more renewables than everybody else? Why do you think they're doing that?
they're making more than everybody else in general, including coal plants
That's you're dodging the
and
question.
nuclear plants.
You're dodging the question. Why do you
No,
think
but
they're
it's not.
building
It's an
so much
unfair
renewable? And it's not an unfair question. Why do
compared
you think
to
they're?
everything else. Are they making more renewables than coal plants?
Uh, I don't
No.
have the numbers off the
Are
top of
they
my
making
head.
more
I think
renewables
that
than
it's pretty close.
Are they making more renewables than nuclear in terms of in terms of energy generation? No.
I don't know if that's true, but I'd have to look it up. How
Nuclear?
much how
No.
much how much coal?
Look,
What's the amount of coal energy generation that they implemented this year?
what's the amount of CO2 that they're generating?
Yeah, it's still going
It's
up,
not
but
from nuclear.
it's expected to come down. And do you know why it's expected to come down?
Why is it expected to come down?
Because they're building so much renewable energy because it's the cheapest energy sources that are available. And it's the best economic decision for China to build more renewables. Yes, they're building coal because they have cheap coal, right? China doesn't give a shit about these targets. What they care about is the economies of it. So why would they build renewables?
We should do this. We should do the same. We should also use cheap coal. In Europe we have hundreds and hundreds of years of coal right under our feet that we're not using, and we're making people suffer as a result. Our energy is very expensive.
Okay. This is starting to get a little bit frustrating for me because do you not understand what I'm talking about when we're talking about damage? The choices that we make are going to have long-term consequences for other systems. So we can think in the short-term idea of if we live in a snow globe
is insignificant.
So again, but it's not insignificant when we look at it on a global scale. Over 25% over 25% of all emissions in the world have a carbon tax on them. Right? So we could say, oh, Canada's only 2%, oh, the UK is only 3%, or whatever it is. But when enough countries do that, that adds up pretty quickly, right? Right now, the EU is spearheading that charge of renewable energy, taxing carbon, because they know that the externality of carbon is going to have more and more and more and more negative effects on all of these poor nations all over the world and their own nation, right? And so that's the argument, is that all we have to do...
I don't agree.
Well, yeah, but
I don't agree.
But you don't want to fundamentally engage with what the economic damage is, because there's some economic damage. There's some issue. There's some extra cost that we have to deal with the planet increasing, right? In temperature.
I think that
those costs should be...
I think that the problem is that none of your models or calculations even consider human adaptation.
Yes, they do.
No, they do not.
That's the thing.
Absolutely not. The models don't even consider human adaptation.
Okay. So again, this is why this is why I jokingly did it in my video, where I just took 1940 to 1980 and modeled the GDP upwards, and I got pretty close to what the GDP actually was. Right? I'm pretty sure economists can do a lot better job of that, of estimating different scenarios, different cases where technology develops in different ways. This idea that, oh, technology will save us, and then in the same breath, you're going to be like, oh, we can't just add transmission lines, those things that have been around for 100 years. We have technology. No, the issue is we have technology to save us. Renewables are cheaper. We can implement transmission lines. We can get battery storage way cheaper. We have all this technology that people on the right are technology is going to save us. It's already here. And this is what's so frustrating on the conversation, is because we have all this technology, we have all these systems.
Hold on. Hold on. The thing with regards to climate damage, we have the ability to adapt to these things. We have the ability to adapt to heat rising. We have the ability to adapt to issues with growing crops. We have the ability to adapt with maybe even rising sea levels. If you look at the Netherlands, for example, and things of that case.
And it costs money that we can price in.
Yeah. Don't know. 1 second. That for us to be able to adapt, we need machines, and we need energy to feed those machines.
Mm-hmm.
If we don't have energy, or the energy is expensive, or we artificially make it expensive, then we can't adapt.
Yes, so we should build those energy systems that are really inexpensive to build. We're making the same argument here, right? I'm saying renewables are the cheapest energy source.
You think if Africa just has solar plants, then everything would be better?
Do you think that they wouldn't?
Have they tried that?
I don't
Yes,
know.
they have. Yes,
Well,
they have.
like
Has it succeeded so far?
so again, renewable energy just beat fossil fuels, right? In terms of
They've
pricing.
installed solar panels across many. They've had these experiments with solar panels across many parts of Africa. Have they succeeded? Yes, in reality, not in the ivory tower back of the handkerchief thing. In reality, have they succeeded?
I'm not familiar enough with.
No, they've failed. They have
Okay,
failed.
okay, but like that's do you not see why that's still not an argument against the position that I'm taking?
You can keep trying. You can
No, no,
keep
but no,
putting resources
I'm
on it.
fine.
But
I'm fine.
I'm saying
I'm
they
fine.
need now. Look, there's 3 billion people who either have enough access to electricity of a regular fridge, and of those 3 million people, 3 billion people, 1 billion don't have access to any energy. So 3 billion have access to almost no intermittent energy, and 1 billion have access to no energy. Do you think that these people will benefit now in the present with burning some coal or burning some natural gas or
Okay,
petrol?
we're not disagreeing there,
Okay,
right?
great. So let's first do
No,
that.
no. Why would we first do that when we have other energy sources? Like, I don't know what this claim you're talking about of like renewables just
I'll
failing
explain.
in
I'll explain. I'll
Africa.
explain. I'll explain. Because fossil fuels are uniquely cheap, reliable,
Except they're
robust,
not.
and can go into many different kinds of machines.
Sure, like it's going to be difficult to get
And
natural.
dense. And dense.
Sure, but it's like you can solve different problems with different energy sources, right? So for physical electricity power or electrical power, you can do that with renewable energy, right?
Right. You need like a whole system
okay, but like
for
again,
that to happen.
you're disagreeing with like the actual reality on the ground of us building renewables, that energy being cheap, and just like shooing it away, right? Like
Look,
I don't know how to
I'm
convince
happy to
or
install.
what's it.
I'm happy to install solar panels on my roof, right?
Mm-hmm.
And cut my energy prices a little bit. But it's not something I rely on. It's like a cute add-on. And I don't need any transmission lines because it's on my roof to my building. I don't need it like far away from me. I may, if I need batteries, I'm talking about thousands and thousands of pounds, maybe even 5-digit thousands of like tens of thousands of pounds.
Sure.
For batteries, but
sure,
like
but
I don't need that.
That's an
I can
argument
do like
that
a cute add-on.
but that's the difference between utility scale and residential scale solar power. Like solar power on a residential scale is not cheaper than solar power on the utility scale, right? Like
No, I'm saying it has its place. It can be used. I'm not against it.
It has its place
But it's
across the globe.
I don't see it.
That's the
that's the
issue that. But you're just saying no, all this stuff that is happening isn't true. No, renewables aren't cheaper. No, like
let me
all these solutions, all of these engineering solutions. What like
yeah, I'm happy for engineering solutions.
Like transmission and batteries.
It's not that we're supplementing. We are forcing people to not do this and do that instead, where it may not be the best solution. Let me just read out something really quickly. Without fuel, newborn babies in incubators and patients on life support will die. Water cannot be pumped or purified. Raw sewage could soon start gushing into the street, further spreading disease. Trucks loaded with critical relief will be stranded. This is Antonio Guterres, UN Secretary General.
Mm-hmm. We both want energy in these places. Like I keep mentioning a transition of power, right? We have to transition to different power systems.
I understand.
Right? Like
I understand. It's you're saying, look, I'm a reasonable person. I don't want to harm anyone. I want a slow transition. Well, I don't know if you necessarily want a slow transition, but
I want as fast as reasonably possible.
I want a reasonable transition. I don't want to ruin anything. I don't want people to, again, I don't want people to get hurt. But somehow with these policies, they kind of end up getting hurt, and prices end up rising, and people's standard of living goes down.
I'm not saying politicians can't ineffectively implement these solutions. That's why something like the carbon tax, which is like the least intrusive and easiest solution to implement, is the best solution. Because all you do is price in what we know will cause economic damage to other places. And you know what's great about it is we can use those funds to invest in that technology that you're talking about to deal with the consequences caused by those fossil fuels. Right?
I don't know. I have to say I'm not it's difficult to it's difficult to say that if the climate increases, then it's a consequences of you trying to improve your life through burning
But there's a
energy.
consequence. We can talk about how great it would be for Africa to have all of this cheap power, but they will bear the worst consequences and worst costs of the climate damage associated with burning that power. Versus if they had gone with renewables,
no,
they wouldn't bear those same damage costs, right?
If they had access to cheap energy, they could protect themselves from anything, or most thing that the climate can throw at them.
And that has a cost.
Of?
Right? That looks like about $60 per ton.
In what sense? Sorry. What is that made up number?
This is not the made up number. That's the current lowest number that Nordhaus has. The guy who won.
So if let's say Africa uses a ton of cheap energy, and let's say the global temperature increases by 0.3 Celsius, then so what?
Because 0.3 Celsius isn't what you're like, isn't the difference between going from like 21 to 21.3 on your thermometer. It's the difference between how many right? Like
that's fine. You could tell me what that 0.3% what that 0.3 Celsius increase, but I'm telling you, if let's say all of Africa right now had access to cheap energy, they've built their infrastructure, they have air conditioning everywhere. Every fucking world they have air conditioning or fans or whatnot, or they stay inside. All their cars have air conditioning. They're modernized, man. They're just like Europe.
Sure.
Okay, or like
they'll
70%.
They'll have to spend more money to get their
they'll be richer.
To grow food.
They will be richer, necessarily richer, to be able to spend that money.
Sure, but they would be even richer if they did renewables.
Like, no, they won't. They'll be 3 times richer if they use cheap energy now.
Like renewables, the cheapest energy source in the world. What are we like? We're going in circles here.
It hasn't materialized. This renewable solve everything has not materialized.
Yes,
I'm sorry to say,
but
from my point of view, it's a cute add-on. That's what it is.
Okay, but you're not engaging with the actual costs of actually installed plants that I'm pulling my numbers from to say this.
Reality.
I am. That's literally what every IRENA study is. It's just taking the installed.
No, you're talking about studies.
It's a study that aggregates the actual costs of installed plants. Right?
Okay,
so my example of the plant here in Alberta that was $1,200 per kilowatt is part of that IRENA study. Right?
Okay, so for the UK now, right, to install another offshore wind turbine costs 50% more than it did 2 years ago. The country has to pay 70% more for its energy to keep installing more wind farms. So
okay, how many times do I have?
The cost of a wind turbine has increased 38% in 2 years. Price paid for offshore, so the offshore power in general, has to rise by 50%. Another person saying 70%. I can send you the newspapers that cite these changes. I'm not looking at studies. I'm looking at.
I'm not looking at studies. I'm looking at the actual installed costs of new plants.
And it's rising. It is rising.
It rose very slightly between 2022 and 2023, but it's still below the cost to install a new natural gas plant, and you get more power out of them per $1 million you spend. Every dollar spent on renewables gives you more energy, and energy that isn't going to cause more economic harm in the future. Let
me show you something. Hold on.
No, you're just going to show me some random newspaper article and not looking at studies that aggregate the actual costs of these installed plants.
Okay.
Right?
Right. So this is in August of 2022 for the UK. This is how much wind we used, or how much wind was available to use.
Yeah.
How much wood we used, how much hydroelectric, how much nuclear, coal, and natural gas.
Sure.
So obviously,
Like,
if there was more wind, we have lots of wind turbines. We could have
okay,
taken
but what's
advantage of
the
that.
capacity factor of your wind turbines, right? Like, you're an island nation, so it's got to be around 45 to
W-
50%,
We're
right?
an island nation next to the sea. We have a
Yeah,
great
yeah,
amount
you
of
have
wind.
great wind, yeah. Right. But like again, you don't have the copper plate that necessitates
Okay.
it. I said
Okay. So
this in my
let's
argument.
just
I
agree
said
to
this in my
disagree.
video.
Let's just agree to disagree here. I have not seen this materialize. I've not. Look. If you know if in the future I see that you first put in a renewable, you put wind and solar, it generates a shit ton of energy, and everyone's like dancing around the wind turbines or the solar plants. They have ton of energy and everything's great. I'm with you. I just haven't seen it happen. I'm even going back on it. I think that fossil fuels still have a very large role to play in the third world, to get them out of the third world. And once they have more infrastructure, when they have more money,
Okay.
with larger
Okay.
larger
Give,
GDP, I'm sure they will
give,
consider these things more.
give me. Here's a thought experiment, right?
Okay.
Let's assume that that's true. Let's assume that renewables are the cheapest energy source, right? And that there is some economic cost to climate change. Would you then say that we should install them in Africa?
If they were the cheapest and they didn't need any backup power, actually, sorry, if they were the cheapest and there was a cost to the climate, just on that theory, I would say that you're right.
Okay. So we fundamentally disagree then on whether there's a cost to the climate and
No.
the
I find them. You're doing a thought experiment.
well yeah, but like
I don't think they are. I don't think they are the cheapest.
I know, I
I
know,
think
I
that
know.
when you
I'm saying
install
that
them,
that's where we fundamentally disagree.
okay, let's
Is
just let
that
me just
like
put.
if you believed that renewables were the cheapest energy source, all in, and you believed that there's economic damage caused by climate change, then you would hold the same position that I do.
Do you believe there's economic damage when you have blackouts?
Yeah, certainly.
Okay, great. So, do you think like if a hospital in Africa
Mm-hmm.
was powered by renewables, let's just say solar for this case,
Sure.
it's the so and then uh they have incubators in the hospital,
Yep.
and the sun goes down,
Yep.
and the incubators do not work. Like, and let's say they had 3 hours or 5 hours battery, but the
I mean,
battery over time,
you're not making a fair comparison because you would, in that case, if you only had solar power, you would have at least 12 hours, right?
12-hour battery is expensive, very, very, for Africa.
I agree.
Let's forget the battery. Let's say you have a generator with petrol.
Sure.
Okay, and if so, we have some sunlight during the day. Let's say a lot of sunlight, but let's say sometimes the hospital needs a little bit more power than the solar panels have to offer, so it needs to turn on the generators, and at night definitely turn on the generators.
Yeah, certainly.
It cannot afford the battery at all.
Okay, but like you realize that like I'm just gonna say the copper plate argument again because that's totally in line with what we understand and know with renewables, right?
Tell me something. So for renewables to happen, is it the case that you need a shit ton of rare earth metals like everywhere?
The metals required to make actual renewable energy systems
The
doesn't.
transmission lines and everything.
Transmission lines are mostly steel and aluminum, and then
Okay.
and
Is it
then
copper plate?
well, it's called a copper plate. Is just the term used for it. It's basically that on a
You would
copper
agree
plate
that
you could transfer
renewables
energy. But
you would agree that renewables and the grid around it that you're saying needs a lot of rare earth minerals.
no, I'm saying it's not. Like aluminum and steel are super abundant, and then silicon is super abundant, and
I don't
then
think you're being honest.
you don't think that silicon is
I don't
abundant?
think you're being honest to my question, because I'm aware that
I'm
it
getting to your
it needs a lot
question.
of rare earth.
So
Yeah,
what do you mean by rare earth metals? Because that's not what
minerals.
a rare earth metal is.
Minerals.
I know, but when do you know what like rare earth metals are like niobium and germanium? You realize that's the
No.
actual term for
Hold
them.
on.
We're talking about copper and zinc and chromium. Those are the things that are going into these renewable systems. When we talk about batteries, we get more into the rare earth metals, right? So these are two different things. And I'm going to have a video coming out soon about battery systems. But we have molten salt batteries. We have obviously pumped hydro. We have a lot of battery storage solutions because you don't have the same constraints on energy density that can still use very common minerals and metals like aluminum, steel, calcium, or sorry, not steel, iron. You can
I
look it
have
up.
a
Look at
I
the
have a
IEA.
chart. I have a chart somewhere.
Yeah, it's the IEA critical minerals.
My understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that the current minerals, rare earth minerals needed for these large deployments or large grids don't exist. Like we need to
That's not true.
hold on. We need to like triple the mining that we do right now. We may find more reserves, but we need to
We
triple
have
the.
ample reserves in
No,
on
that's
the
not true.
planet. Yes, it is.
We don't know that yet.
Yes, we do. We know how many reserves we have. You can look at the USGS. Yeah, that's exactly what it's like. That's the IEA, and you see the minerals.
Copper, nickel, manganese, cobalt, chromium, zinc, melobium, rare earth
Yeah,
minerals, silicon,
look at the
others.
rare earth minerals. They're tiny. They're a little bit on the onshore wind and a little bit more on the offshore wind. When you look at
They're also very
solar, it's
rare.
silicon and copper, right? Which are very common in terms of mining capacity, right? It's a lot of copper, a lot of zinc, again, something that is completely unreasonable to mine. Manganese, nickel, all of this stuff is found in Canada. Chromium, right?
No,
Molybdenum.
there are certain places in the world. That's not true to
Yeah,
say that it's abundant everywhere.
Cobalt is the, and I can't even see cobalt on, if it is there, it's so small that you can't see it on solar and wind, correct? It looks like cobalt might be on the coal one, to be honest.
I'm also considering the transmission lines, the batteries, stuff like that.
So the transmission lines that are steel and aluminum being one of the most common metals that we have available, same with iron. And then when we talk about batteries, we're talking about different battery chemistries. So when you build a car, you need high energy density. You don't care about that as much when you have a stationary battery because it's not moving. So you can get away with lower energy densities that cost less and require less critical minerals. Again, the battery chemistries that are being developed all the time. Or you have pumped hydro, which is just mostly concrete and steel.
I'm gonna have to find something. Would you agree with a different point entirely that climate-related deaths have gone down 98%
Yeah,
over the
this is
last
a
century?
Bjorn Lomborg point. Sure, that's totally true. We're talking about economic damage, economic prosperity, and
Is
food
economic
security
damage
across.
is economic damage increasing or decreasing with regards to climate change?
Economic damage is increasing. There's
Can you show me?
no doubt in that.
Can you show me a graph?
I have it in my videos. I literally showed you how much economic damage was caused by climate change.
You calculated it on like you have a calculation of it, but can you show me like world in data kind of thing?
What? That's such a weird
Please?
request to have. What? Like not off. What are you asking for? The like I can
So
show you
if for
how
example,
much damage
I can
that
go
climate
to
change has caused
I can go
to.
to world in data and see climate related deaths going down
Sure.
over the last 100 years. Can you show me climate related damage or costs going up? You know, so we can
Yeah.
compare
Yeah. That's
something.
literally every like economic data point that I showed in my video. What are you asking for?
But these are kind of guesses that what you showed in your video.
These aren't guesses. This is talking about how much crop damage that we know occurred. This is talking about how much physical damage occurred from hurricanes and droughts and all of these things that are.
Show me physical damage from hurricanes.
Okay, or the number that I have off the top of my head was, I think it was $5 billion due to the floods in Pakistan. Another 550 million damage to
give me like a rough total
Myanmar
for the year. Give me a rough total for the year.
Well,
we have an $80 trillion. We have an $80 trillion GDP economy globally.
Yeah. I don't have these numbers off the top. This is such like a bullshit argument to bring up in a debate for me to go search through
20 billion,
like the data that I have, right? Like
20 billion, we're saying. Let's just scale. Let's just guess it upwards. 20 billion, 25 billion.
Like, okay, let's do this then. The climate change is about $60 per ton is the estimated damage cost. So you multiply that by the number of tons, and that's how much estimated damage.
No, I don't want it by CO2. I want you gave me actual examples of hurricanes. That's great.
Yeah.
And floods. That's throw that in there.
Yeah.
How much? Add it all together. How much was it for a year, or the year before that, or the year after that? Just so we know.
But like I said, it's predicted by the amount of like aggregate debt. Like, what do you?
Do you not understand what I'm asking? Am I exaggerating here or something? So
I understand what you're saying. It's just like, I don't have the numbers for every hurricane, every flood, every system, every fire, right? Like off the top of my head, right? That's what I'm saying. It doesn't change that the economic damage exists, and I've been able to give you examples, but I can't pull every example on the planet off the top of my head.
I have a chart that the global cost of climate change is more or less going down between 1990 and 1921, but it's more like a straight line, slightly going down.
Okay,
I'll send you.
Sure, I'd love to see it. So you would then still admit that climate change is this? See, I would have to like verify this actual reference, right?
Give me your own source. That's fine.
Okay. Do you want us to just like go through the IPCC report and show you like all the economic? Of course not.
I want a world in data. I want a world in data or something similar.
Sure. Like I don't have that number off the top of my head.
Oh, by the way, I found the thing for the minerals. So I'll give you this, but as far as I can read it, we need 42 times the number of lithium we're mining currently by 2040.
Is this Mills?
25 times graphite, 21 times cobalt,
is this
19
Mark,
times nickel.
Is this Mark Mills?
I'll send you.
Or is this looks more like
I think it's from the mining, from like someone doing a mining sector thing. From the mining, from their business side, like we would need to do this more. There's a lot of money. Please invest in us.
Sure. Yeah, like things like lithium and graphite need to go up by a lot. Nickel. Yeah, I don't disagree with these. Yeah, we have to mine more. Surely.
Okay.
I don't disagree with that, especially going down more lithium-ion battery case. But what I was talking about energy. I was talking about energy systems. If we want to talk about transportation, that's a different argument. But when we're talking about energy systems, the mineral demand is substantially lower.
Sorry, how is it the case? So we need to mine. Even mining takes energy, right?
Yeah, and it can be supplied.
So we need a shit ton. Okay, we need let's say 42 times more mining than we have now by 2040. A shit ton more metals, a shit ton more work. All this is very energy intensive, I would assume.
Yeah.
Just to get to a situation that when the sun shines,
and what is every mine in BC run on?
I don't know.
Hydroelectric power. The thing is, when we have these arguments, people always forget that hydroelectric power exists and hydroelectric power is an important aspect in this whole situation. So you have
But
solar, wind,
I'm pretty
and
sure that
hydro.
I'm pretty sure that mines in Africa, like deep mines in Africa, they use fossil fuels. There's no way that's
Probably.
connected to a power plant somewhere. That power, and
I,
what would it power if it did?
it depends on the mine, where it's located, how remote it
Yeah.
is. Yeah, I mean, it's
Okay.
going to depend on a whole bunch of a whole like host of factors. Surely.
So are you even telling me that it's that you can have a mine that's connected to a power plant and then it's just electricity everything? That doesn't seem that right to me.
No. They need diesel. They need like to power their trucks. But there's a lot of new mines coming out that are using electric trucks. That happens all over Canada here. I believe it's also happening in Norway.
That electric trucks, and as far as I understood, you need for the battery for those and for those to not run out of electricity
They run
just
them
when
on
you need them.
rail systems. Is the
Oh,
solution to it?
rails.
Like
So
do you know like
you need the rails.
the buses basically?
Okay.
That yeah, you basically hook them up to the transmission lines. Is some of
Do
the
those
solutions
exist
for open pit?
currently?
Yes.
So sorry, do those transmission lines for the buses exist currently?
What the sorry, for the hauling trucks at mines. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. There's cases of that, and then there's in underground mines they typically use the battery powered ones. But yeah.
Okay, well, sure. I'll take your word for it. I'm not gonna argue over
Yeah,
these small things.
you can electrify your
I,
fleet, but like you can still use, again, when we're talking about this, you're acting like every single like thing needs to be fixed. Like, yes, we're gonna need in certain
no.
cases some fossil
The
fuels,
opposite.
and we're still gonna
The
need
opposite.
diesel and
No.
like.
I'm not saying everything has to be fixed. I'm adding to the cost of just plopping a solar panel and saying we have manna from heaven.
So sure, but these are different arguments. So when we look at mining, where like the majority of the cost in mining comes from grinding, like grinding energy,
Okay.
and that can be all supplied by electrical power. And then for things like diesel trucks and all of that, yeah, you're probably still going to burn diesel. Same with like aviation's probably going to be one of the last things that we decarbonize, but that's fine, right? Because like we're again slowly transitioning. I'm not saying like all of this has to stop today, all of this has to change today, right? Like it may be the case where like a mine here in Canada electrifies their fleet and then sells their old fleet to an African mine that can run those diesel systems so that they can get them cheaper so that we can extract mineral, right? Like things aren't going to change tomorrow, but we should build a whole bunch of renewable energy systems. And yeah, sure, in Africa, if they need some level of backup, you can build small natural gas plants, and then you can invest in carbon capture and storage if that's what's necessary, right? But we should build
Can we
out a
also
majority of renewable systems, and then but we still have to like come in with a level of tact and engineering understanding that like, hey, we need to integrate these grids, we need we need backup energy
I'll tell you
here.
what. I'll tell you what. Let's look at this way, right? Let's say if it is the case, and forget governments for a second, if it is the case that solar energy
Okay.
or wind turbine is cheaper
Mm-hmm.
for the end consumer. Let's say we're in Africa and we're next to a mine,
Mm-hmm.
and we own the rights to the mine.
Okay.
This is entirely free market, yeah. And we want to power the things that drill the mine.
Mm-hmm.
If it is the case that solar and wind turbines are cheaper than any other alternatives, I will not complain even the slightest.
Perfect. Then we're in full agreement and in
But
full
that hasn't
agreement
happened yet.
with what exists. I
But
don't
that
know what to
hasn't
tell
happened
you,
yet.
but you can literally look at how much these plants
Okay,
cost to
if it
build.
is
Right?
if it is cheaper,
I don't
I
know what
will
you
buy
want
it.
me to say.
If it is cheaper, I will buy it myself for myself or whatever venture I do in the future. If it is in fact cheaper, I will just based on that, I will buy it.
Okay.
But so far, I haven't seen that happen.
Okay. Well,
And
we're just gonna
a friend of
run
mine
circles.
was
So
looking for off the grid solutions. He was telling me how much those things cost. He was telling me
I
that the solar stuff was cheap. It's the $35,000 battery that was the issue.
yeah, that's I don't disagree. That's a tiny copper plate, right?
I'm not sure what you mean by that, but it's like
Well,
batteries and a
well, no,
system
but
around it.
like because he's by himself, it's a small copper
Yeah.
plate, which falls in line with exactly the argument that I've been making.
What do you mean by a small copper plate? I'm not following.
If I have a cabin in the woods and I'm putting a solar panel up there, then I only
Yeah,
have myself to generate energy, which means you need
sure,
an expensive battery to do that because you can't draw wind power from 1,000 kilometers away. So that's a
sure.
small copper plate because your copper plate is now like 1 kilometer, not 3,000, right?
Yeah, yeah, it's just
So we're in
$35,000.
agreement. Again, we're in agreement that on really small scales, I would say like so let's look at England for example. If I was to suggest anything for England, I would say you guys should invest in nuclear power.
No, wait. Before you jump to England, don't you think that 35,000, let's say altogether, let's say 45,000 to be, to be off the grid, just as a
Mhm.
stupid example from YouTube, just not,
Sure,
with
sure,
no
sure. Yeah, yeah,
no
yeah.
relation to anything really.
Yeah.
Isn't that like a bit expensive, bearing in mind that 35,000 was the battery?
Yeah, yeah, that's
Because you
that's
can have fuel, you can have
yeah.
logs,
Yeah,
you
yeah.
can burn logs for heat and whatnot. You can have a generator.
I'm not gonna disagree with you. I'm not gonna disagree with you at all on that point, right? Because like it's obviously going to be expensive to run a tiny system like that, right? And battery systems are coming down in price, but they still need to come down more. There's some really interesting chemistries that are using things like sodium and have the potential to bring the cost down to closer to like $50 per kilowatt, down from like all in installed like $300 per kilowatt. Um, but yeah, like there's a cost to being a first adopter, and we see that in Germany, we see that in South Australia, right? Because the renewable systems were more expensive than they currently are, which are under that of fossil fuels, and we know that because that's how much the installed costs are. We're going to run in circles with this. So
All right, let's
if you want to move on to other points
yes.
of contention, I'm happy to go there.
Okay, so I would say I think we've done energy costs in Europe. I think we've done how like like with regards to climate catastrophe, is it as bad as people are saying, or can we manage? Or can we manage reasonably well? What else from that video do you think needs to be discussed?
I mean, I think it fundamentally comes down to the economics, and we are just in
I'm
two
happy to
different
discuss
two no,
economics.
but we're just like in two totally different worlds on this, right? Like I guess I would ask you the same question that Destiny asked of like but I think actually sorry, I think you already answered that of like if this is an externality, right? Like we should tax it. And I think even if I were to ask you like is there some cost to climate change? Even if it's low, maybe the answer is $10 per ton or 20, like would you agree with any cost at all on carbon taxes based off your belief system? I'm not asking you a hypothetical. Do you think that the emission of CO2 by humans is causing any economic damage at all that we have to somehow account for as an externality within the market?
Okay, so
The say and so
the,
I'll preface this with
so
like
wait,
this
let
is the
me let
same.
me
Yeah,
let me preface it in this way. We're talking about markets of countries, of
sure.
individual countries, and the
Yeah, just generally speaking. Yeah,
no, we don't have a world government that can tax all markets, right?
not a world government, but I'll add this item that the EU is going to start implementing an import carbon tax
Sure.
if countries can't.
EU is very
I know, but this gets around the issue of people being like, well, it only affects us because
no,
now
right. So
you
so the
can't just
EU's
import goods that have higher CO2, right?
yeah,
That's
I'd like to see how the EU does that, because it literally outsourced all the carbon intensive stuff out of the country. Now it's going to put a tax for it to come back in. It's just ultimately going to hurt the consumers who already have a lower quality of life in the the EU zone,
mhm.
and the money will just go to the governments to, I don't know.
Well,
I don't know what
In
what the
Canada,
but
I'll give you an example of how the carbon tax works in Canada. I don't know if you're familiar, but basically they collect taxes and then they give it back on a per capita basis. So if you produce less, so for instance, in my case, since I cycle to work, I cycle to the gym, do those kinds of things, I have a relatively low carbon footprint. So I get back more money than the carbon tax costs me.
Get back more money from what? From where?
So different, like fuel will be carbon taxed, different things will be carbon taxed. That goes into a pool, a bucket of money, and that bucket of money then gets given back to everybody in the country, right?
Like a
So,
dividend?
well, not exactly, because so like if I fuel up and it's $2, maybe
Yeah.
maybe 20 cents of that is the carbon tax, and so right, that all goes up. So it's literally just the money goes in and then the money goes back. Albeit 90% in Canada's case, 10% is meant to go to other renewable investment and technology. So since rich people broadly consume more CO2.
Wasn't there like a Canadian politician that said that Trudeau is charging on this point, sorry, Trudeau is charging people 2,903 Canadian dollars a year and they only get back 1,800?
That's Polyev talking about axing the tax. He's misinterpreting the parliamentary budgetary office report that came out, and he's talking about numbers from 2030 and still more or less getting them incorrect.
So no.
Not yet.
So what he said is wrong.
What he said is wrong for right now. What he's saying has a grain of truth to it, but it doesn't include all of the other, again, costs associated with like climate change and carbon tax.
Okay, so
sorry, climate change. But
I'm fine with this.
Yeah,
I'm fine with this pot idea. I think some countries don't give it back at all. They keep it for themselves and they decide what to spend it on. Ultimately, though, I don't see how this addresses the problem. I don't see how it ultimately will go back to the consumer to increase the cost of goods. If it's possible, and I believe this could be something that companies were doing, if the companies could pay another company some money to suck CO2 out of the environment, and they'll use it to offset the tax credits, so they'll pay less, or they'll do something along those lines. But ultimately, these countries that have implemented it, they're not the worst polluters.
Sure, but they still
and when
represent...
I say polluters, sorry, let me retract. They're not the worst emitters.
Sure.
It's just from
like
from
I said,
a market point of view. Markets are judged per country, and it's not just on a global scale. You can't prove that if someone drove a car in California, that someone in Africa now has slightly less rain than they did last year. And I'm just saying. And it's just difficult.
You can't actually believe that, right? Like it's the aggregate cost. It's the aggregate damage of putting CO2 into the atmosphere, causing more floods, causing more hurricanes, causing droughts, causing fires, right? Causing all of this economic damage, resulting in lower crop yields. Again, I don't have the exact number of all of this off the top of my head, but you're able to say this is how much damage has historically been attributed to climate change. At the very least, I think economists and natural scientists are competent enough to do that. Even if you want to say we can't predict future systems, we can say this is how much climate damage has cost historically.
Sorry, can you repeat that? So I'm not aware of hurricanes increasing more than they did 100 years ago. You could say drought.
Sorry. It's hurricane intensity. Is the comment, not more hurricanes. I believe I could be getting this wrong, but it could possibly be less hurricanes but higher intensity. But anyway, I'm just saying that storms, damage, even just lower crop
Okay, so
yields, lower
should
crop
America
nutrition.
should America send China a bill for the hurricanes that goes through Florida?
I think that America should put a carbon import tax on goods coming from China such that they're forced to reduce their carbon emissions in order to be more competitive.
What is the difference between that and just a regular customs or tariffs?
Because this
Or why,
tariff
or
is
why should the Chinese
directly
see it?
because
Should
this tariff is directly impacted by the decisions that companies make, and it's meant to incentivize lower carbon emissions, right?
Okay, so
it's not a blanket tariff. It's like if X
right,
company
but
can prove that it used less, or it only cost X amount of CO2 to build this object, then that object will be more cost competitive when it comes to the States. That's why it's a free market solution.
how could well, it's not a free market solution at all, but how
Well, it's
how could
entirely
they
a free
how
market
could,
solution. This is the way that externalities work. This is
no, free
this is
markets don't
no,
have
this is a libertarian principle.
taxes. Free markets don't have taxes though.
Okay, if okay, if let's imagine a libertarian paradise,
Yes.
and you live downstream of me, and I
Okay.
have a coal plant, and the coal plant is putting selenium into the water and poisoning your water downstream,
Yes.
right?
Who owns
Okay.
the water stream?
I imagine in this case it would be the
Me? Do I
no,
do
well,
I
both of us
own
because what I'm doing. Let's just say our borders. I own the water upstream of you, and you own the water
Yeah.
downstream of you. But my actions affect your water, right?
Okay,
Because
I sue you for affecting my water.
okay, and who enforces that?
Well, there would be still a government,
Yeah,
just
exactly.
a minimal government.
And so in practice, you would sue me for the costs of doing that, and then I would probably have to put in some filtration system to make sure that the water that's discharging is drinkable or adequate for what you need downstream, right?
Sure.
And so
Yep.
in practice, you doing this thing of suing me is putting a tax on my business that I have to pay, and that's where the carbon tax is really effective.
But
Because
I have to
if
prove.
I
I have to prove that you're doing stuff to the water.
and this is where we're going to disagree again, but we have proved that that there is an economic impact due to climate change, right?
We can't, we can prove on a planetary scale that me driving my car does something on the other side
But
of the
we
planet.
can because
Even in aggregate,
we know that any addition of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere is causing those negative consequences, right?
even if you say that that all of America made the entire rest of for let's say 20 years made the entire planet warm up by 0.3 Celsius, that doesn't mean that people have to pay for that, or it doesn't. It's not obvious that there is a cost to X that American has to pay the rest of the world because it increased on aggregate 0.3 Celsius. You can't.
But
It's just kind of saying, look, this is the environment that we're in, and we need to adapt to it.
and that adaptation has a cost and should be accounted
Because
for in the
it's
economic
as if you're
calculus.
saying,
So no, but
it's
but
as if you're saying, 1 second, it's as if you're saying the world has to be perfect, and
no.
we are the only people to cause that. We're impure, evil beings that are ruining the earth, and therefore we need to pay out. We need to stop ruining the earth first of all, and if we are ruining the earth because we don't have any other choice, we have to pay all the poor people who are not
But
ruining the earth because they're just
the
too
issue
poor
is you do have a
to do
choice.
that.
No, the issue is we do have a choice, and I would say that you would probably want to make some level of exceptions for extremely poor nations. Like the carbon tax is an aggregate
The
of
only thing I want
historical
to make
time, but no, but
the
like
only thing I want to make to extremely poor
no,
nations is to make them richer.
I want that as well.
And I think them being richer will make them more capable of withstanding certain climate issues.
The issue that we're having here, and the crux of our discussion, like separation, is that I believe that the release of carbon dioxide is causing economic harm and damage, especially to poor nations. and
Okay,
that
great. Let me
and
let me
that
make a
and then
point.
no no no
Let me
no
make a
no
point.
no I'm gonna finish my point because you've been cutting me off a number of
Go
times here.
ahead.
Is that like we need to then put some price because that damage has some economic cost, and that's why it's like inherently libertarian. It's an inherently like free market solution because you are saying this system isn't accounted for in our market, right? And so we need to apply it. That's the same thing that we did with sulfur dioxide. That's the same thing we would do with lead in our water. That's the same thing we would do with any other externality that isn't adequately taken into account by market conditions.
I don't know how you so there's 2 points. There's 2 points to make here. I'll make the first one and then I'll make the second one.
Okay.
I think about 15 or 20 years ago, there was a large earthquake or something that caused, there was an earthquake that caused a flood in Haiti. Haiti
Okay.
now that has the government collapsed, but there was a large flood in Haiti as a result of an earthquake, I believe.
Yeah.
And 100,000 people died, or 20,000 people died, and 100,000 were displaced. It was high numbers. I don't exactly remember it, but Haiti is
I
basically
know.
a very poor area.
Yeah.
Huts, not exactly stable infrastructure,
Mm-hmm.
and then compare that to a couple of years later, a higher intensity earthquake happened in California, in a certain part of California,
Mm-hmm.
and only one person died because he was repairing his car. He
Mm-hmm.
was underneath his car repairing his car as the earthquake was happening,
Yeah,
and he died.
I get your point that like
So if for example we take Haiti
mm-hmm.
and we make Haiti rich, we give them access to cheap energy, they're able to build houses that withstand these sorts of floods, or barriers that withstand these sorts of floods,
Mm-hmm.
all these sorts of things that come with being a rich country and come with having better infrastructure, better buildings, better access to vehicles that rescue people, or take them out of a difficult situation, or technology that can predict or see that the earthquake is happening and evacuate people before it happens. Those kinds of things would mean fewer people will die, perhaps less economic damage, so on and so forth. So that's kind of the point of where I'm
I
going
know
here.
we're not going to have a disagreement here because again, I'm
Okay,
just
great.
going to make the copper plate example. Islands are in a different scenario
No,
than mainland areas, right?
forget that. Just the fact that they were able to improve their situation economically,
Mm-hmm.
and they were able to use machines and feed the machines energy to build better houses, better barriers for floods,
Mm-hmm.
more cars to evacuate. All these things require energy. Forget where the energy comes from for a second. Just have that energy cheaply and affordably for a country such as Haiti.
Yeah, I
So
think
that's the one thing. So let me just. The
we
thing is
don't
also
disagree.
with externality is, okay. So I'm gonna say something that doesn't necessarily make sense to you, but bear with me.
Okay.
The thing with externality, and I'm starting to believe that these negative externalities are kind of an oxymoron in a sense. I'm not talking about your example with poisoning the water. That's not an externality. That's you violated my rights. You
Yeah,
violated my
just
property
like we
rights.
violated the rights of people all over the world by
You have to
making the
prove.
climate hotter.
Yeah, I don't think you can prove that even in the least. But let's say if you say that I follow this model of negative externality, then you can say, well, okay, so let's say I take diesel, or I take petrol. Let's say I take petrol and I put the petrol in an ambulance, and this ambulance needs petrol because it needs reliable energy sources. It can't necessarily use a battery because it may run out, and a variety of different reasons. And let's say that this ambulance, your either wife or spouse or important family member, really had to go to the hospital very, very urgently, or they will get permanently injured. How much is the value to you? How much is the positive, not negative externality, how much is the positive externality of this petrol being in this ambulance for you at that point in time? It's thousands and thousands of dollars, but you're only paying a tiny fraction of that. You're only paying whatever it costs to fill it up. So we're not exactly calculating these positive externalities from our ability to have cheap energy. And even if someone says, even if you had to pay thousands of thousands for that ambulance ride, sorry, for the petrol in the ambulance, you probably would pay it, but you're not. And if someone says you using that ambulance means I get slightly stronger hurricane, you say, okay, here's some money, I'll whatever. It doesn't matter. You would pay that. But we're not factoring that in. We're not factoring the positives and the negative because it's a very silly concept. It's very difficult to. It's essentially like a utilitarian, but on the scale of a nation, not on the scale of a planet. A utilitarian kind of way of saying, how do we get the perfect model by economists on a piece of paper? So I'm not exactly fully. I haven't fully thought about this, but it's starting to. I often hear this argument as a way, from a libertarian point of view, for governments to get involved in stuff. And
Sure.
it's
Okay.
because
So
we can't measure it, therefore we need the government to get as if they've solved problems better in
again,
other departments.
we can measure it, but so let's just go back to the coal mine example. What if my
Okay.
coal mine, in this externality example, I'm only poisoning your water, but I'm providing all of this cheap coal to a whole bunch of other places,
Right.
right?
So this is exactly
No. But and now you suing me, right? Puts extra costs on that, right? Like we're saying that, but you're still directly affected by that coal mine. So should we say, hey, like actually, I don't think we should make that coal mine clean up their selenium. Like I know it affects you, but look at all of these other positives. And rather than doing that, you say, hey, coal has positives and negatives. We need to pay for those negatives, and then that will get adjudicated in the market. And that's
right. So
literally all the carbon tax is.
This is exactly where a utilitarian system of yours fails miserably and mine does extremely well. Because
Okay.
from exactly what you're saying, I can even give you an example with putting, those pots there's like a material Teflon.
Mm-hmm.
A government allowed like a company to dump Teflon in water because the benefits from Teflon to society was so much more than the cost of dumping it in the water. So you can say here, the coal plant from a society point of view is more beneficial than me losing out. But in a libertarian society, that is completely
But
irrelevant because no one cares about society.
why can't we say it's both beneficial and has a negative consequence, and then we just
Because in
cost
my
in the negative consequences? Like
because in my
why are they
because
not
in
ubiquitous?
my world we don't have we don't have negative externalities. We don't have what is beneficial for
Okay, but
society.
how do
And
you
like
take
and like
into
a
account?
just a second.
Okay.
We don't have a utilitarian calculation of what's beneficial for society. You just you violated my property rights. You have to deal with me.
Yes, but that only makes sense in the simple scenario that we came up with. How do we do that with something like SO2 that causes acid rain to like a bunch of people, right?
Right.
Like this is
You
like
have
acid rain is much more akin to what we're talking about here, in that like I have a plant that obviously creates like economic prosperity and value and all of these things to other people, but the
but that doesn't
SO2 is also
matter.
causing negative consequences.
That,
And why
that,
doesn't it
that
matter?
It doesn't matter for libertarian because it doesn't matter. It's like saying
But
if you say, for
the
example,
libertarians care about harm and whether
yeah, it doesn't
your
matter
rights
about
have
the
been
benefits.
violated.
Yes, your utilitarian calculation cares about benefits to society. The libertarian does not.
But the
You
libertarian
you you
does.
no.
The
The, you,
libertarian cares about liberty, right? And the harm principle. The harm principle is like central to libertarian thought.
yeah,
I
I'm
can do
trying to
whatever I
explain.
want, but I can't hurt other people, right? Like
Yeah,
that's what we're.
yes, I'm trying
And
to
if carbon
explain.
hurts people, right? Fuck.
Yeah, I'm trying to.
Okay.
But you're saying that, or I'm trying to explain to you that your system has a utilitarian calculation of both harm and positives. The libertarian does not. It just has harm, and you have to prove harm. You have to prove that your property or yourself has been harmed. So if for example you say there's a coal plant and it emits like some kind of smog or some kind of cloud onto a nearby village, and then the nearby village can prove as a group that it is affecting them negatively, they can take it to court, and then there's a stage where you have to prove that yes, this person is in fact harming this other person or this group of people. And once
Okay.
that has been and
All right.
who has the
Okay.
property rights for that?
Okay.
So if, for example, if for example the coal plant says yes, you are hurting the people with this minor irritation, then they'll either have to put a filter or they have to pay the people forever to allow them to continue to pollute.
Okay.
Or all the people, if it's not proven otherwise, then the people of the town can just say, we will pay for your filter, please put it in for us. We just don't, you have the right to do what you're doing, but we don't like it, so here's us paying for the filter. But you have to prove that, and you don't have that in
Well,
this case.
we're obviously disagreeing there. So do you
Okay,
disagree?
can you prove that a coal mine affects the globe from its emission?
So what you can prove is that any additional anthropogenic CO2 will have increasingly negative effects on the climate. And let's do, I guess, another thought experiment example. I'm a farmer in Africa, and I grow a certain crop and I get a certain yield. And then we're able to do experiments in the lab that show that, hey, if you have X number of high temperature days, you're going to get a lower crop yield. And then we know that carbon dioxide in the atmosphere traps heat and increases the temperature on the planet. And so I can say, hey, because the temperature is increasing due to CO2.
Say to who?
What?
Say to who?
To who what?
Who are you saying hey? Who are you saying hey to?
Who am I? Selling the crops to?
No, who are you saying? Who are you talking to when you say hey?
I don't remember when I said hey. Was it like, the scientists? The scientists are like, hey, this is what's.
Forget the scientists. The scientists say that on heat days you lose this yield. The scientist says this is tied with climate change. Go. Who are you talking to now?
So now we say you
want to go to China and say, hey China, you're costing me like $20 a year or $20 a month. They'll say, hey, fuck off.
Yeah, but that's where the benefit of the import carbon tax comes in. Is even if China doesn't want to pay it, they have to, because you're saying, well, we're just going to apply it.
How is it reaching the farmer?
Because so in this case, the nation then says, like, any goods that we come from China are going to be subject to a carbon tax, right? And if those companies can prove that they have less emissions, because we know those emissions are causing harm.
Okay, but what if
right?
your country buys nothing from China?
Then you would apply it to any countries that you're buying it from. Obviously, it's not a perfect system because it's scattered across the globe. That's why when you have places like Canada,
you actually have no real way. You actually have
but look how much economic weight we have in if America, well, Canada to some degree, and the EU implemented an import carbon tax, right?
Okay, you would have a huge countries.
But that would have knock-on positive carbon reduction effects across the globe if just the EU and America did that.
Okay.
Because those companies.
How would it affect China? How would it affect China?
It would affect China such that companies that want to compete better in America or in Europe would have to prove that they've used lower carbon emissions to create their products.
Great,
right? Like that's the point. It's an incentive-based system.
But you're talking about companies, and China is the one that owns the power plants. The government, sorry.
Yeah. Now all we've done is incentivize them.
The companies just take electricity from the socket, like they don't produce it they don't run their own coal plants.
Well, exactly. But China cares a lot about their economic output. So they'll say, "Oh man, we can make more money if we put in more renewable power." Right? Like then your country starts to complain about these things and they get built. Like China still has some semblance of responsibility to their citizens. Right?
Yeah, not really, because they just have rivers of pollution, smog in Beijing constantly, in Shanghai. They have terrible pollution.
I agree.
But
they've been
like people
building
in Beijing
renewables.
have like kids in Beijing like have the asthma thing that you need like a humidity you put over the mouth with like a anyway. it's not only pollution. It's also they build a lot of buildings, and there's like dust in the air as you walk down. But anyway, if a company in China is trying to sell to a company in your country, and you say you used electricity in China, which you think, how do you know how much energy was needed to produce these goods? First of all, how do you know that the energy that they did use was produced X amounts of CO2 based on what? I'm not sure. And then how would you tax them? And if you would tax them, then it's like a company is getting taxed, not just China itself is getting taxed. So if essentially for them, if the companies themselves can't do too much about them because they're not the government, they'll just try to sell it. It feels like it's a tariff, and they'll try just to sell to other countries that have a lower tariff. Because again, the companies are the companies. It's not like they can do something about how China, the government, is producing energy.
Sure. And they very well may sell to other countries, but they're still going to try to sell to your country at a higher price.
Okay.
And then that makes your domestic sector more competitive. That's the beauty of a free market, is competition. And all the carbon tax does is say this thing causes harm, and we're going to add that to the cost of goods.
Just
and then
that's fantastic.
you play in
Then
the
put
capitalist
tariffs
market.
and just put tariffs on stuff from China, and the reason for that tariff is because China pollutes a lot.
Sure, I'd be fine with that. I'd be fine with that on garbage and a number of other things. We can make this
They'll just
externality argument for a number of things. But it's not that they'll just sell to other people. They will still sell to you at those higher prices, and then those higher prices might not be economically viable, and then your domestic market may be able to outcompete them, right?
They'll set it at a loss so that you don't have that it decimates your own market, like they're doing now. That it decimates your own market, and then when you no longer have a market, they'll just put the price to what it was again.
Okay, this is just like a
well, they're doing it now because I'm aware of it, but yeah.
Okay, but
so for example, they're trying to flood the market with very cheap electric vehicles, which obviously isn't a bad thing, but it is like going to destroy like companies like Ford trying to invest in vehicles.
I mean, I would have to look into them selling at a loss. You're saying they're just. Again, like at the very beginning, I mean, you specifically said that America or that China specifically cares about their economic GDP. And so they're selling all of these electric vehicles at a loss. I find that really hard to believe.
They're trying to. Okay, so do you remember I said that in this conversation that in America they told the coal miners that they're going to replace their job with high-paid Windows solar jobs, but in the end, they were not allowed. They closed the coal mines, and the wind and solar jobs went to China. So, for example, any solar company in Europe, or a lot of solar companies in Europe, have gone bankrupt because they just can't compete. Even if they get money from the local governments, we had a thing with the UK as well, because China is just so cheap in this regard that basically they're 95 to 97% of the global market in terms of solar panels and whatnot.
I mean, I don't disagree. This is going to get into a more meta argument of like globalization. It's going to get into like a global. I just want to make one comment here. In 2023, China added 50 gigawatts of coal, but they added 200 and what's the number here? They added 217 gigawatts of solar and 76 gigawatts of wind last year. So I just wanted to circle back to that of like China is really ramping up their renewable energy, and from the projections that I've seen are expected to start decreasing their carbon footprint, just since we're already on the topic of China. I just wanted to circle that back to what we had talked about before.
How much nuclear?
I can look it up right now. 57 gigawatts. So solar and wind would be almost 3 times as much as coal and nuclear combined.
Okay.
again, we're talking about this economic powerhouse who cares about the cost of energy, and they're implementing solar and wind at insanely high rates. And again, I think this is just a testament to the cost of these things coming down so much. But again, I don't want to derail it too much. I just wanted to clear that up. That this is what we're
And
looking
again,
at.
like I already said, if it's cheaper for me, if it's cheaper on the free market, I will buy it for the
Yeah,
cheapest option.
yeah.
But
But
as far as I can see in England and
again,
Europe, I don't know about Spain, it's
I,
increased the costs.
yeah, well, we can go in circles a million times. If I was to put on the cap of like I'm god of the EU, this is what I would have done. I wouldn't have shut down any coal plants. I wouldn't have shut down any natural gas plants. I would have just said, hey, these are going to operate as peaker plants for our renewable energy systems. While we build out our renewable energy systems, we're going to add them and add them and add them. We're going to add in transmission lines. We're going to add in battery storage systems, and we're going to integrate these systems together. Right. And then as we're able to confidently outstrip the power that we have, we can start shutting down these coal plants, these natural gas plants. We can implement carbon capture if there's certain scenarios that require it for the island nations, like in your case, in Britain. We'll add nuclear.
We're not like islanders, like in the sense of like.
But you're islanders in the sense
Hawaii
that you can't
or
transmit
something.
I know, but in the sense that you can't directly transmit your power. We may be able to get aligned to, I guess, because they're already doing it with Ireland. Sorry, England's a bit of a weird case because of Brexit when we talk about Europe and the integration of these systems. And then we'll make sure that we have a lot of extra hydropower up from Norway and Sweden and integrate all these systems. So again,
Norway's providing us with natural gas.
Sure. But do you see where I'm approaching this? Of let's say that solar and wind is cheaper. Let's say that all of these things that I'm saying are true. I'm not here to say, hey, kill all these plants for virtue signaling sake. We still need to make sure that power demands are met. We still need to make sure that all of these systems are met. But we should price into the market these systems and reduce our use of them as much as we feasibly can. And from what you've told me is that wasn't implemented properly in a number of places, and that caused detrimental impact to people, and that's shitty. I'm coming from a Canadian perspective where that's not the case, where we have so much hydroelectric power that basically all we have to do is add some transmission lines, add a bunch more renewables, and we're going to be off and away. Same with the States. They add a bunch of solar and wind. You basically turn, I think it's 0.4% of the Sonora Desert in Mexico and power all of North America, right? These solutions are coming online. These solutions exist, and China's seeing it, and all of these countries are seeing it. But places like Germany probably have paid too much of a price in some sense. Yeah. Sorry, that sounds more like a closing statement, but we're I'm happy to go through any of these other perspectives with you, but I'm just curious if there's anything else in the debate that you disagree with me with, because I don't.
Could we agree? Could we maybe agree that the more fanatical green agenda politicians ruined it for their countries?
Yeah, I think when we're I'm gonna say in the case of Germany, I'm never going to disagree with you on that perspective. So, yeah.
Okay, because we also have other examples of we also have other example with food production and other things, and in the UK I think we were number one in Europe in terms of being the cleanest, or the second in Europe of having the cleanest or lowest emitting country. And then at some point our prime minister said, look, let's put on the brakes because energy prices for people are very high right now, and it's unsustainable. So he put on the brakes, and people are like very angry that he's putting the brakes on a green industry and trillions of investments and whatnot. But anyway,
Mm-hmm.
energy costs in the UK are hurting the poor certainly, and
Yeah.
Germany is deindustrializing, so that's very negative in that
Yeah.
sense, and
But
it is around energy.
again, my position is that like the poor are only going to get hurt more by climate change. If we can agree that like things like lower crop yields and more damaging
Wait, you're talking
storms
about
and
the
all of
global poor or the poor in Europe?
well, both, right? Like
Why both?
well, because poor people will still be impacted by these events. Like poor people are going to be the ones closest to being day to day on food. So if food prices go up because we're producing less food, then they're going to be the most impacted by that, right? Like,
Yes.
so like, look, I think we both want the same outcome, right? We want poor people to be richer. We want poor people to have more, to be able to bring themselves out of poverty. But I think for me, we have to like engage with the reality that like negative consequences of climate change have made that harder and have dropped their economic potential today below what it otherwise would be had climate change not occurred. And
Yeah,
we as the West,
I think you need to engage with the fact that the green energy policies, certainly of very large rich countries, have also made it harder for poorer countries to have access to cheap energy, to fossil fuels specifically.
sure, I think you can make an argument that places like Ghana that have a bunch of natural gas off their coast, or I think in my video it was Mozambique, or I forgot which African country the WEF was going to, or the World Bank was going to give funds to for natural gas. Like there's a really important um, graph when we're talking about this of like we can talk about how much CO2 we've produced that we're producing year over year and how much CO2 has been produced. And Africa is like 3% and America by itself is like 25%. And the expected damage is almost the inverse of that. That the total economic damage to a place like America is going to be like 3%, but it's going to be like 25 or 30% in Africa. Yeah, I agree. I agree with the emissions chart. What I'm saying is it's expected to be nearing its peak in China, especially because, as you saw, they're putting in shit tons of solar and wind.
Yeah, so just with regards to Africa, and the 3 billion people who have almost either intermittent or no access to energy, I think and I think you agree, I think them having access to even fossil fuel energy right away is
Sure,
necessary, and we should not impede
I
that.
totally concede to that point. My point
Yeah,
was
yeah,
that
I'm not saying
yeah,
you didn't.
yeah. My point is like, say we're in the West and we give tons and tons of aid to Africa, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why not? Why isn't like we could make the argument that that aid should be going into these long line transmission systems, to these renewable energy systems, and to natural gas plants, right? Like, so maybe we can like agree in a world where it's like, okay, our energy is 70% renewables and 30% natural gas plants because batteries are too expensive or whatever it is, right? And like the answer is we build up as much renewables as possible because that 70-30 ratio seems to be about the point where where you need before you start needing like much more storage and transmission because you can deal with the up and downs. It still kind of depends on your copper plate, but it's kind of closer to a country scale at that point. Yeah, I'll surely take a look at the what you're talking about in that case. But I think part of it is that you need to build out all of these systems, right? And
Yeah, I
you
think
need that
even
infrastructure. I'm not going to deny, like, you need the transmission infrastructure to make renewables work. And that's why I harp on that so much. And if you don't have that infrastructure, then your renewable systems are probably going to fail. And I'm not going to disagree with you there. The Bank of America did a really good example of that, showing that Germany's all in renewable costs, if they don't have any connected transmission systems, are like, I think it was in the order of like $400 to $1,000 per megawatt hour.
Maybe.
But the thing is, then when you add the copper plate transmission things, that's why I gave the example of Texas. You get almost a linear slope as you increase the range which you can transmit this energy. Yeah. So my guess on why it failed in Africa would just simply be that you don't have the transmission infrastructure to make it succeed because of the intermittency issue. And whenever this video was made, I guess is, again, batteries are expensive. Solar and wind was more expensive. Even
No,
in 2017.
I think this is when they want to transmission it to Europe from the
Oh, when they
Sahara
wanted
Desert.
to transmission it to Europe. Yeah, I would have to see what the problem is. Transmitting energy underwater is extremely inefficient. So I'm not 100% sure how
I
well it's going to work
think
in
I
even the
think
Ireland case.
I think either Spain or Morocco. I
Yeah,
think like
Spain,
they
Spain and
try to
Morocco
do
is
it
super
as
close.
much as little as possible because it does like touch and so not touch, but like not
Well,
far
yeah,
in certain
yeah,
points.
you can throw a rock at each other. From what I've heard.
I don't exactly think it was all the way underwater or very much at all.
Yeah, it's still you have really big losses, and that's why again in my video I said like, hey, like in the case of islands, nuclear seems to be like the way to go. You can like renewables plus nuclear, especially as more nuclear plants are getting investment and systems put into it that seem to be able to ramp up and down a little bit better. They may be able to replace natural gas in that role of kind of being peaker plants for renewables.
So if I can summarize your position, it's like we should think seriously about wind and solar, assuming we have the right conditions for it, and we should not deprive anyone of energy if they need it right away.
No, like if especially in these poor nations. Sorry, I got sidetracked chatting with you, but like, um, yeah, there's a really good chart showing how much emissions are attributable to different countries, and I think if you add the U.S. and China together and India, it's like 55% or something like that, right? And because damage due to climate change is an aggregate of CO2 emissions since anthropogenic climate change has been a thing, so say 1900, that the onus of that damage should be taken with a grain of salt and perspective. That like a place like Africa that wants to industrialize hasn't contributed to all of these all of these carbon emissions, but probably you could make a good argument that like, okay, let them do natural gas in these systems, but like interact with them and be like, hey, what if we put carbon capture over here? And there's certainly a place for carbon capture. There's certainly a place for nuclear.
What
There's certainly a
about
place.
geoengineering?
Geoengineering just has a cost, and that cost needs to be accounted for by
Okay.
carbon taxes, right? Like at the end of the day, like there's a certain amount of climate change baked into this pie, and by all accounts, it's probably going to be 2 degrees as long as we decarbonize. If we don't decarbonize, well, then fuck, we're looking at 4 degrees or more.
As far as I know, with the most accurate satellite measurements of heat in the
Mhm.
atmosphere, we're looking at 2.1 Celsius from 1880 to 2100.
I've seen, yeah, like there's different estimates. It's going to be again. The thing about these models is it kind of depends on what we do. So sometimes the
If we
misdirection on these
say the
models
same,
is like, oh, well, this model
if we
said
say that,
this.
yeah, but I think some models are improbable at this stage. Some of the
Yeah.
more severe models are improbable at this stage. And I think this is, if we don't do anything, then the 2.1 Celsius is the most likely or reasonable.
I think it's a little higher than that. I think it's closer to 3 degrees, but
I have not seen that.
I thought
But
it
I,
was
but
2.7 to 3 degrees. But nevertheless, like there's some level of damage that's associated with that. that issue, right?
And what if I just say that it's 2.1 Celsius increase, and like if it increases if you have higher heat waves in your area, tough luck, you have to adapt to it. And in some areas that used to be like frozen, now are like green lush tundras. Sorry, not tundras, green lush areas. They're like, okay,
well,
good for me.
so there's certainly positives to climate change. Like there's
No. I'm saying,
yeah,
sorry. I'm saying like this is just the climate. The climate in sorry, the climate in a hot country gets hotter, tough. Your problem. And the climate in another part where it was freezing cold is now a bit warmer. Great, you win. But it's not necessarily something that you have to
yeah.
sue the other countries for, or something like that. It's just this is the environment you're in.
Well,
Fix it
yeah,
yourself.
but the issue is, but do you not see how that's like unfair, right? Because it's like the reason that I'm in this situation is because of the actions that other nations took, right? So I have to pay all this money. I have to do all these things to geoengineer solutions to these problems because you did other
Yeah,
things. This is
you have to
exactly my
you have to use different machines because other ones are inadequate. You have to use different ways
sure,
of
but
planting food because others are
so
inadequate.
again, this is why I said his policies will harm the poor, right? Because his policies will very literally hurt the poor more than anybody else. We know that Africa, we know that's like Central Asia, basically between
Jordan
the
Peterson
tropics.
policy, sorry.
Yeah, well, no, between the tropics are going to feel the
Sorry, whose
worst.
policies are we, whose policies do you mean?
Sorry. Like what Jordan Peter? Because I mean, this discussion originally was about Jordan Peterson.
And
That
what was he saying specifically, that we don't do anything?
No, he's saying, well, in a sense, he couldn't agree with the idea of an externality, and seemingly neither will you, in that we should price in the damage caused by these harms and work on decarbonizing. Where his argument seems to be, well, let's burn more fossil fuels, let's do all these things to bring up the economic prosperity of these nations. My argument
Okay.
is that they will suffer even more from those consequences because the consequences of
Suffer
climate
even more
change.
than suffer even more than having access to cheap energy? And I mean fossil
No,
fuel, sorry.
no. Again, we're going in circles here in that the the prosperity that they would get from going
Oh,
to a
sorry.
mostly
Can you
renewable system.
can you just pause for a second? I have to let my dog in. Hold on.
Sure.
Sorry, you were saying?
Yeah, just I mean, we're just circling back to what we were discussing before, where the damage that would be caused to these African nations will be based off how much carbon emissions are in the atmosphere and how much geoengineering that they'll have to do, how much what's it,
Well, forget
desalination.
geoengineering. Forget geoengineering. But like, if the question is, I guess that would it be, take Jordan Peterson point of view, if you give these nations access to abundant fossil fuels,
Mhm.
and they put all that into the environment, and maybe even China continues in its
Mhm.
current trajectory, and India as well,
Yeah.
would they be worse off in that scenario where they have access to fossil fuels than if they didn't have access, and all the other countries reduce their CO2 output? So is the damage from
Um,
climate change worse than having access to abundant fossil fuels?
well, I mean, there's a few different questions baked into that. I think if we were to, I'll try to steel man the position as much as I can in that, like, would they, if they burn fossil fuels and had the means to do all this stuff, would they be in a better economic situation? Almost certainly, right? Industrializing large places are going to bring a lot of people out of poverty and do all those things. It's just we have to estimate how much extra damage is going to be caused because of those things, and how much harm that's going to affect. And if and then what the difference would be had we gone down the renewables route, right? So like let's say between now and 2060 the GDP of Africa goes up by 100% because we gave them fossil fuels. But there's and that's including the economic damage that they still have to deal with because of climate change. But then in the renewables case, they go up by 200%, or if the temperature's high enough, 300%, 400%, right? Like, we know that there's like an exponential damage to climate change. So, in some of these cases,
exponential damage.
yeah, we get
I'm
like,
not sure I've heard that.
yeah, all of the climate damage models are like power curves. So they don't increase linearly, right?
Logarithmic or just increasing.
No, like a power curve. So like that can be like some number to the power of 2, right? Is an exponential, right? So anything
Like a
over
hockey
the,
stick.
not necessarily. I mean, the hockey stick would occur if we got to like 10 degrees or something like that. But
Okay.
I posted the images in my video, right? The economic damage models that we were looking at, where I said the range was between $60 and $150 per ton, right?
Hasn't your friend Lombard also had something about damage models and what to do
Well,
about certain things?
Lomberg specifically cites Nordhaus. He just cites really old versions of Nordhaus in his paper and his studies, and it's kind of a smoke and mirrors bullshit because Nordhaus has updated the damage costs.
Isn't he saying like
Lomberg's in
terms
favor of
of
carbon
like damage?
taxes.
Isn't he saying in terms of like damage, but like a cost? Like there's 4 different costs, and like the most extreme one is the most costly. The extreme on the other side is not costly, but maybe there'll be more damage. And he's saying choose something in the middle.
Lomberg did not do that. Lomberg said, I don't like these other models. I'm going to go with Nordhaus. And then he went with really old Nordhaus versions. At least that's what he said in his paper. He could have said something different somewhere else. But his paper specifically talks about why he chose the Nordhaus models. But those models were quite old because the paper he wrote was like 2022 or 2023. And he chose like an older Nordhaus model. And then Nordhaus in 2023 came out with an even higher number. So I wouldn't have expected necessarily Bjorn to have that in his paper. But the person that Bjorn literally cites and references is suggesting a $60 per ton carbon tax. And when you use a $60 per ton carbon tax, basically all of Bjorn's points fall apart. Because he's comparing what the world would look like if he is modeling future economic outcomes of climate damage models, right? Which is kind of the sticking point that Jordan had a problem with. So if we want to use Bjorn's cases and just update his models to the more realistic ones that we're seeing, Bjorn's conclusions would completely change.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
With regards to the models, there has been many times where the newspapers relay something from scientists saying we're not gonna have any ice caps by this year. Everything's gonna end by this year, and even when I was in school, like everyone was saying, yeah, we had acid rain, everything's gonna die. By the time I'm 30, and I reached 30, and it hadn't happened.
So,
how is it? I mean, I can appreciate saying that the models were right with regards to temperatures increase, But all these panicky situations did not occur like the newspapers
So
were saying.
so I mean I would say there's a good boomer meme about that where it's like in this year I heard about leaded gasoline, and this year I heard about CFCs, and in this year I heard about acid rain, and it's because we implemented government regulations to deal with those consequences and problems. And I'm just suggesting that for CO2, if we want climate change to be a thing of the past, where people say, "Oh, I don't even know that was a problem,"
No,
then.
hold on.
But
That's
no,
that's
no,
not what I'm saying. That's not
I
what I'm
know.
saying at all.
I'm getting to that because you did mention CFCs, I think, or acid rain, and the reason we don't have acid rain is because we implemented government regulations on the externality of SO2. Right?
Not necessarily. There were some there were some companies. I mean, I'm aware of the treaty, but there were companies even in the late 70s who decided not to use it.
Sure, I'm sure there's countries that didn't do it, but like
Not
America
countries,
implemented
companies.
the Clean Air Act that forced companies to regulate SO2. I can't speak to specific companies or anything like that, but yeah, there's some level of like a company might want to show that they're like green or environmentally care or whatever, repair their image. Like there's certainly there's certainly cases where companies without the necessity of like a carbon tax or a Clean Air Act will do it by choice, but they are taking an economic hit compared to everybody else. Versus if everybody's on the same playing field, then
No, we're talking
not.
about we're talking about those those aerosol canisters.
Well, those were
And
CFCs.
yeah. So if you just say,
And
let's
it took a global effort to.
Yeah, if there's a global
like,
effort to approach companies
yeah,
and say we're all going to agree together just to use a different type of gas, it's not more expensive or less expensive, it's just a different type of gas, and the reasons are this, then we should do that, and it could have happened just by agreement.
And I would argue that's what's happening with renewable power now, right?
No.
Not to be okay. Yeah, then I guess China's just stupid for all the renewables they're putting in. But
I mean, I can certainly say that it was pushed for Europeans. It was pushed down our throat.
The renewable energy, sorry,
green energy in general.
Green energy, sure. Again, I'm not disagreeing that like green energy in the past was really expensive, right? I'm just saying that now it's not, and that's clearly shown throughout. But you
sorry, you were saying before about
sorry, I lost my train of thought.
50 years of
50 years of panicking. I would say it sounds more like you're seeing news articles and things. I would say you should probably look at the actual climate models and the scientists talking about this, because there's typically a disconnect between these two things, and what the scientists are saying and what the politicians or alarmists or anybody else are saying are disconnected on this topic. And
okay, so
that's why I say like the climate models are broadly correct. Like, yes, the polar ice caps eventually would be completely melted, but like our climate modeling capabilities are quite good.
So we've got Greta Thunberg saying in 5 years.
Sure, but she's not a scientist. She's not a scientist.
Saying we have AOC saying we've got 12 years till everything breaks down. We have Al Gore saying I'm not saying those, but what you're saying is basically that there is no climate catastrophe.
I know, but I'm here to defend my positions, right? Like, one of the reasons I made this YouTube channel is so that I could debunk bad science and talk about the practical realities to these things and suggest realistic solutions to these problems and take a more pragmatic approach to these things, right? And like, so I'm not going to sit here and defend the actions or choices of others. All I can do is, with the small bit of reach that I have, provide people with the evidence and information to make better decisions and pressure their politicians into good decision making. And one of the like, I know that's like a big ask because it's a tiny channel, but I'm only going to be here to defend my positions and my beliefs. Right.
What about Okay, so I've just found a place where basically there's 50 years of failed doomsday predictions.
Sure.
And
Like,
I remember one. Maybe it's not so much related, but I remember. But the reason why I want to mention it is because the Club of Rome and the Sierra Club did also mention it. That's actually one of the reasons why they started
I,
the
I'm I
overpopulation one. The
again, I'm not particularly interested in this. To be
okay,
perfectly frank with you, like I don't care what um people said in the past. We like there's a reality to what's happening, and again, it's well in line with the predictions that we had made. Jordan mentioned Mann's predictions, which are broadly accurate. Um, he so like
but I think he man really ignores human adaptation. So, for example, he was saying
well, man wasn't
something.
he wasn't modeling economic damage. He was modeling climate.
He
He
was
was
saying
modeling
something like we
temperature.
run out of food. We run out of food. I'm not exactly sure because I'm getting this third hand, but he was saying something about he was saying climate change will hurt all these countries' ability to produce food, but then he ignored synthetic fertilizer and
I,
all
but
these.
but he would be right, correct? Right? Like if I'm producing less food than I otherwise would be, had climate change not existed, then that's a correct statement. I'm able to make up the difference with technology, which is something humans are pretty good at, but that comes at a cost. And I'm gonna sound like a broken record, but like that cost needs to be accounted for in the market, and that's what carbon taxes do, and that's the externality that we're dealing with.
Why even count that cost? If for example you're producing lower yield because of whatever reason, you said, "Oh, I can buy synthetic fertilizer and produce twice as much than I did, a year ago." Then this is the right way for me to produce my crops.
I agree, but you're producing less crops than you otherwise would be, which would drive up the
No,
price, especially with the no,
you're
but
producing more.
but you're producing over you.
It is factored in the price.
Okay, but like if I produce 1 unit of food this year and then next year I
Hmm.
produce 1.2, but I otherwise would have produced 1.5, do you not see how that's economic damage to me?
Sure, but it's like
How would you suggest how would you
I'll
suggest we
see if I
deal with
can
that?
explain. You're talking as if this is sort of absolute. Like my models say you should be doing 1.5, and actually you're only doing 1.2 because of the environment you're in. The environment you're in it is what it is in a sense. Like the environment is always against you. It's never like a soft and gentle environment that
Sure, but it
wishes
could
for
be
you to grow
against
and see.
you
It's
less.
always
And
against you.
I know,
Sure,
but
it
okay,
should be
but
against you
but
less,
but
but
what are the reasons it's against you? Are the reasons because of the actions of other people, or are the reasons because
no,
of just randomness in the environment? Right? That's the
I
that's
mean
the
it.
question that we're having. And so
I
I'm
mean
saying
I mean it.
the evidence clearly shows that it's the um, actions of other people that are causing economic harm to me. Right? The
Right. So,
farmer.
but it's like I don't know if the evidence clearly shows that. So, in my
So
opinion,
do
that
do
is
do
that.
you so do you
But
do you
let me
no no
let
no
me just
do you
hold on.
disagree? Do you disagree with the studies that look at crops and say, hey, like they're in greenhouse, right? Like the thing is with a lot of these studies, it's like this is a crop in a greenhouse, and we tested it under a bunch of different conditions, and we tested it under a bunch of different systems, and then we found that this is how crop yields are affected by these different stresses, right? And so if I have to add more fertilizer, we can add that cost into the economic analysis or all of these different things, right? Like you're acting like these natural scientists are just like pulling this shit out of their ass. Like the people
Yeah,
spend 10
I'm not
years of
saying
their
that
life figuring this
I'm not
stuff
saying
out.
I'm not saying they're putting the shit out of their ass. It's just like it's a fucking planet, and you're talking about a guy in some country with an acre field, and you're saying I can predict that you would have made 20% more food if not for climate. I don't
Okay,
exactly see
but okay,
how that happened. But one
okay,
second,
but
just with regards to economics, everything he does more is already factored into the price, right?
yeah.
If he needs to use more fertilizer, more water, more greenhouse, more plastic, more anything, that is factored into the price because someone else is paying for it. Because he just
And
increased his prices because he needs to,
and would you
and then someone else will
say
pay
would
for the
you say that
prices.
that would you say that hurts the poor?
But if he can, okay, so let's say he increases it, he needs more fertilizer, right? But now his yield is much higher. That doesn't hurt the poor.
Okay, so my example, now that I think about, was probably bad using the 1.5. Let's say in this case, he's just meeting market demand. So this year he made 1 unit of food, and next year he made 1 unit of food. But because of climate change, that 1 unit of food now costs more, right? Because he had to use more fertilizer. But he otherwise wouldn't have needed to use that extra fertilizer if climate change wasn't occurring.
No,
Right?
the synthetic fertilizer would have increased it by a lot more than 1 unit.
No, because
It won't
no, because you had 1 unit of food in your first year, and then in your second
Yeah.
year, because of climate change, you would have only made, say, 0.75 units of food, but you had to add a bunch of fertilizer to get you back up to 1. That's what I'm saying. And then I'm saying that wouldn't have occurred had climate change not been a factor, right?
So I think in the case of if you had organic fertilizer versus synthetic, you have twice the yield. You'd have 2, and then maybe you would have gone down to
Sure,
1.8.
I'm not disagreeing with whatever fertilizer you're using. I'm just saying that the negative consequences of climate change mean that your food prices go up, and that's going to hurt the poor. Versus if you didn't have climate change, your food prices wouldn't go up. In this very simple example, right? Is that
In this very isolated example, let's say the food is slightly more expensive than it could have been,
okay?
but if someone is applying more technology and more things, ultimately he's scaling the production up, and that would reduce the cost. And
But
bearing
he's
in
not
mind that
scaling the
the other,
reduction up in this
hold
example.
on,
He's making the
he,
exact same amount of food.
no, he's scaling. Well, he's making more food than he did before, but slightly less.
Oh, yeah, but again, you could make that argument for the climate change case of like, oh, I scaled up production. Now I can make even more food. Had climate change not, like, whichever way we want to put this, you always make more food if climate change isn't real, right? Like, can you at least engage
Right.
with that part? Like,
I understand, but I'm just saying that the adaptation part,
yeah.
so the adaptation part would be, for example, that before they used organic fertilizer, now they use a synthetic. They're paying a little bit more, but they're scaling, but they've got twice as much. And then we're saying, okay, but then it's not twice as much because climate change made it 1.8, so it's 80% more instead of 100% more. But it's still scaled up because they had a problem. They used human innovation to solve it, and they scaled it up. And bearing in mind, even if there is a cost, and you're living in a hotter country where everyone pays, everyone has to pay more for air conditioning, everyone has to pay more for the energy that powers air conditioning. Everyone, it's more difficult to do. That's just the country that they're in. It's a hot country.
I know, but we have to associate why those costs are occurring, right?
Well, I don't know if
Like,
it's necessarily a good idea to go down this road, but humans are evil destroyers of the
I'm
planet.
not saying humans are evil
Well,
destroyers of
hold
the
on.
planet. I'm saying that,
If we didn't do anything from the industrial age, we'll be in a very, very poor quality of life,
yeah,
right?
I fully
And
agree.
people will be dying left and right.
I'm not saying we
If we
shouldn't have.
if
I'm not saying we
Right,
shouldn't have used coal or natural gas or any of those systems to industrialize our planet.
right. So it's just silly to say that yeah, since 1880 we've burned this many stuff, but we've also increased our quality of life, our how long
100%.
we live for, a ton of other things
I'm
since that period of time. It just but we've done something bad. So fucking what? We've 10x'd everything else. So like 10% less is a problem.
no. The issue now comes into the case of, since we have the means to do it at lower costs, so it's economically feasible,
Sure, I'll
right?
tell you what. If it's economically feasible, again, no argument from me. Okay.
Sure, but you don't want to agree with the, yeah. So yeah, I'm not gonna go into that. Like,
To be honest with you, let's be honest, right? If nuclear would have been as cheap as it was in the 60s and 70s to build, early 70s, before we had all these regulations, we would be using nuclear now. We wouldn't even be talking about coal.
I
And
fully agree. I'm
so
right there with
if it was
you.
just left to the market, left to the libertarian free marketing, we would be nuclear, heading to nuclear fission, not fission, fusion.
Sure. I'm not I don't know if there's anything that I said in this discussion that, or debate, whatever you want to call it, that would say I don't agree with that
It's just that
position.
we have all these regulations. We literally could have had 3 revolutions in energy production, which we did not have because of all the regulations we've had so far on it.
Sure.
And energy production is a there's a investor who's very insightful, an Indian
Mm-hmm.
guy that has these pearls every once in a while, and he basically showed that we were supposed to have a revolution in energy, and we needed to, because look, we need cheap energy not only for Africa, but we also need it for AI right now.
Yeah.
And there was a guy saying about there was a guy from that Shark Tank. I'm messing up, saying he he's investing in data centers for AI. He's saying there's no point even considering Canada because there's so many regulations. It's so difficult to um, get energy for things like data centers that they're not even bothering to start the process. So I'm just saying we need these innovations. We needed these innovations in energy, and instead we got regulation and a ton of and the number of regulations shot up, and the number of lawyers shot up, and the number of litigations shot up,
Sure.
and that's the only thing that we've had a revolution in since the 1970s.
Sure. Like I'm not in disagreement. Like we have issues here in Canada, like even, building solar plants, building nuclear plants, but like I'm not going to say that these are um like don't exist. What I don't agree with is that they're insurmountable, right? And this isn't an insurmountable problem, and the policies that again, Jordan Peterson seems to espouse will cause more damage to poor people than otherwise would be, right? Like that's the only comment that I'm making, is that you and me both want cheap power. We both want to pull people out of poverty. We both want to do all these things. I don't disagree that natural gas and coal were all influential in building the societies that we have today. But it doesn't change that, like, we have the technology, the engineering capabilities to provide cheap renewable power that won't cause economic harm, or will cause substantially less economic harm to the global south, who's already been harmed by the amount of carbon dioxide that we have in the atmosphere, and their GDP has been negatively impacted by it. Or, like, this is the only argument that I'm making, and that we as the West, who have caused the majority of CO2 emissions since the Industrial Revolution, as you can see in the chart that I added to the chat, bear that cost, and we can bear that cost with carbon taxes to give incentives to companies to move even faster in that direction.
If only we were giving those carbon taxes to Africa.
You could make a very fair argument to do that, right? You could make a very clear argument that says all the carbon taxes that we have should go to sub-Saharan Africa to build out their energy system such that they can industrialize. I think you could totally make that argument, and I would be right there.
Jordan Peterson interviewed someone with regards to making Africa richer. Her name is Magata Wade.
Okay.
And she has like a TED talk. She talked to him as well. She has a very insightful reason as to why Africa isn't as rich as it is today.
Okay.
I wouldn't like to think that because Africa the way it is now, and again you're not saying this, but I will, is the reason why elderly people can't turn on, in the UK, can't turn on the heating when it's -4 outside. I don't think it's fair to either side per se. Despite it, being I can agree that it's being mismanaged, sure. But I don't think Jordan Peterson is as mean. Obviously, you have this is your area of expertise in your line of work. I don't think he's as mean. I think he's more railing against the leftists, in quotations, that have like this fanatical approach to certain things, not a rational approach.
Mhm.
And perhaps if you had spoken to Jordan Peterson yourself and persuaded a more rational approach, and he was on a good day, maybe he wouldn't get so riled up about it. I'm not
Sure.
going to speak for him. I'm just
Yeah.
I'm just saying. I think he has like a thing now,
Mhm.
and it's not like I agree with everything he says as well. He has like a thing now where he finds like a group of people that are hurting with a bad ideology that is hurting society, and he's like all in on them
Mhm.
for better or for worse, which is the leftists in quotations again. And maybe and I could agree that maybe it's not the most rational position to take, or maybe he's blinded by certain bits of evidence after a certain point. But
Yeah.
I don't
I
think
mean,
he's trying to hurt people either.
sure. I think you could argue that, and to be fair, I did change the title of the video, so it was more accurate. I got a few comments saying it's a bit too clickbaity. So I
Hey
changed
man,
it.
you need those clicks.
Yeah, you play the game. So I changed it to Jordan Peterson's views, or
Sucks.
Jordan.
He's evil.
No.
He hates the poor.
Yeah. Peterson's climate change views will harm the poor rather than he wants them to suffer. Right. So I think that's probably a more accurate statement to his position. I just think that it will cause more harm to the poor, especially because the poor, especially with food insecurity, are going to be the most impacted by that, even if they industrialize. And yeah, I mean, if there's anything else, how long is this? Yeah, it's been 3 hours.
Yeah, I think we should wrap up.
Yeah, do you like?
No, I don't have a final statement. I think we covered most all possible bases.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, I guess my hope
I'm
is,
still upset. I'm still upset. I have to pay so much for energy costs here in the UK.
yeah,
FYI.
and look, I think that's going to drive some level of, and I don't mean this in a mean way, some level of motivated reasoning in your case, because, like I said, kind of affects people with a small copper plate. If feel free to watch some of the other videos that I make on this topic. I've talked about the carbon tax here in Canada. I've talked about how intermittency is really important. My next video is going to be all about battery chemistries. Um, and I hope, I don't think that I changed your mind. I don't think that you changed my mind, but I hope I was at least able to give some level of context into the position that I hold, and that there's at least some kind of pragmatic level of solution making that we can go towards.
Okay, I'm gonna title my video Didi doesn't understand. He's evil. Something something.
Sounds good.
Okay, anyway, thanks for the chat. It's been really very nice. I do appreciate the calm reply and the engagement. And
Yeah.
best of luck with your channel.
Yeah. Thanks, buddy. Talk to you later.
Bye bye.